All right, so the Marvel Cinematic Universe is something that we've talked about extensively.
Hmm.
Like I've done quite a few of them. Everything from Iron Man 3 forward, I just reviewed when it came out, and then me and you did a whole MCU retrospective from the first Iron Man to Infinity War. It was when Infinity War had just come out, like on like a home release, and and one of the things that drew me to you saying you wanted to do this one was that you haven't talked about Endgame on camera yet.
Hmm.
We were basically kind of doing a sort of because it's been what, a little over, actually we're going on almost 2 years that ended,
Hmm.
which is wild.
Hmm. And plus, I thought the timing was good with just the wrapping up of WandaVision to kind of look back and see, because at the time, it has a lot of the hype with it. And then you can go back and rewatch it after time has passed and see if it really holds up as well as you thought.
And I was wondering because both of these made my top 10 for their respective years.
Hmm.
I copped out and I put Infinity War and Black Panther together because I couldn't decide at the time.
Hmm.
But and obviously Endgame was this big thing where you went and you saw it in the theater and all the other fans were there, and it was this, it's almost like it was like a spiritual, it's like a religious
I
experience.
hate that I missed Infinity War in the theater.
And I think what was also great, um, and I want to say the same was for you. I know we talked about this with Infinity War because the fact that you didn't see Infinity War, this is a miracle. But did we both see both of these with no spoilers whatsoever?
Hmm.
Because because I feel like Star Wars movies, I always end up learning about by accident because of some asshole like a week
Hmm.
beforehand. But I got really lucky with these.
Yeah, but I feel like like I heard, especially when Endgame was out, that people coming out of the theater that were spouting spoilers were like getting beat up.
Yeah. And there was like a whole campaign from the cast and the producers of like, it became a whole thing of like spoiling Endgame is like, would be like the ultimate sin.
I remember the joke was no one tell Tom Holland.
Yeah, or Ruffalo.
But I feel like the rule was if you spoiled Endgame, Kevin Feige will find you.
Yeah, there was always. Have you seen the compilation of Paul Bettany saying snitches end up in ditches? Because
Mm-mm.
he says it at like every. It's become a running joke.
Which is funny that it carried over because I remember telling you like WandaVision was so tight-lipped on what was going on. Like IMDb gave away nothing.
Yeah,
Like
and there was the whole
IMDb didn't
thing
even give
where
away the cat. The IMDb literally updated the cast list with the number of episodes as it went.
and the thing was a couple of, I think it was a couple of years ago when one of the movies was coming out. Kevin Smith did an interview at like a con with just Bettany and Olsen.
Hmm.
And when you know about WandaVision now and you go back and watch that interview, you can tell there's so much they're trying to not say.
Hmm.
It's like it's crazy that these people can do interviews at all.
Hmm.
Like to the credit of people like Holland and Ruffle.
Oh, I forgot Ruffalo's kind of a chatterbox too.
Yeah, because there's that interview he did with Cheadle, where Cheadle I feel like about slapped him because it was the lead into Infinity War, and he says, "Oh, wait till you see this one. Like everybody dies." But like when he says everybody, you can see he's literally about to say half,
Hmm.
and you could see Cheadle get like genuinely frustrated. I guess they started pairing Holland with Cumberbatch because Cumberbatch has never says a damn thing.
Hmm.
So Cumberbatch is there to basically be like his guardian of don't say anything.
Hmm.
The thing that was the where I was going was about how Endgame was practically a religious experience in the theater,
Hmm.
and how it was like, how could anybody ever possibly top this? like how like any franchise or any other Marvel movie. Like how do you even where else do you even go? Well, as we saw, and we talked about this before, WandaVision shows that there is the well is not dry,
Nah,
not by any means. It's like
even that even was shown early on with Far From Home.
yeah, and the way that you can how much you can play with the weirdness of the dusted half coming back
Mhm.
and like the aftermath of that.
I even love how Far From Home, there's a really great scene that seems such like a real life thing where his teacher talks about how his wife faked being snapped away to get away with an affair.
I love Martin Starr and Far From that scene where he's trying to take a picture of himself and his camera drops in the water is just perfect physical comedy. But I love the basketball scene when we see the
Mhm.
footage of when they just suddenly came back in the middle of a game.
Mhm.
But the direction I was going was um, a lot of people in retrospect were starting to say that they might think Infinity War is better when the high of Endgame wears off.
Mhm.
Where do you stand with that?
I could see where people get that, but the last hour of Endgame is just it's just it's just like a big giant reward for watching the other 22 movies.
Yeah, because you tend to have those the whole battle scene thing has been played out for so long, and even in a lot of the good MCU movies like Black Panther, it's like you just get really desensitized to battle scenes and just giant groups of people colliding. And honestly, I kind of used to feel that way about the big battle scene in Infinity War and Wakanda.
Mhm.
But in Endgame, you would think not only are we just sort of played out on battle scenes at this point, but this one is like nearly an hour long,
Mhm.
and you would think,
But on a rewatch, if you notice, there's not that battle scene is long, but there's not really any battle scenes prior.
yeah,
The
and there's
closest you get is when Captain America fights himself.
yeah, and we're so familiar with so many characters now. Like even the children of Thanos have faces and names.
Yeah, everybody that's colliding in this big mess, for the most part, especially on the good guy side, has been a main character or a heavy supporting character in another movie or a series of movies.
And you get to see people like Infinity War. You get to see people like in mid battle. You get to see people interact that have not interacted with each other yet.
Hmm.
Like when Bucky picks up Rocket, and they're kind of a team. And probably one of my favorite moments in Infinity War is I am Groot, I am Steve Rogers. So would you? I know it's early to determine this,
We
but are you?
Infinity War, even in the 5 seconds that he's there, even Infinity War gives us a great Ned moment.
I saw something after Endgame came out that made so much sense and was actually quite moving.
Mm,
Was at the end of Endgame after everybody comes back, we get the one scene of Peter meeting up with Ned in the school hallway and they like hug.
mm-hmm.
And somebody said Ned has two scenes split up between Infinity War and Endgame. And they're very brief. And his scene in Infinity War will make you laugh, and his scene in Endgame will make you cry. It's like even a combined 15 seconds of Ned went as well as it possibly could have and can give you some sort of reaction. Like it is still insane to me. Like because if you want to get on, were you ever looking into it when the whole Scorsese thing was going down?
I just know that something was said and a lot of people got mad at Scorsese.
where he said he doesn't consider them cinema. He considers them like theme park rides
Mm-hmm.
because they're just kind of they're fun, but they're like kind of emotionless at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
And well, I didn't get mad at Scorsese because who is anybody to tell Scorsese what is and isn't a movie? But I do think the argument there is that Scorsese did say he's watched like maybe a couple or maybe parts of a couple, and he feels like he got the gist of it.
Mm-hmm.
And from an outsider's perspective, I could probably see that. Like if you see bits and pieces of one thing and you think that's pretty much what it is, even if you watch the whole, that you may just stick with that. But as far as a storytelling angle, this is all the individual characters and like I said, all their interactions and the characters that get attached to other characters. There is a massive, massive story here that is 100% character driven. And
You've got a character arc going, especially with Tony Stark, a 12-year character arc. Over how many times? 9 times he played Tony Stark?
oh god,
I
that
think it's 9, because I think him and Hugh Jackman as Wolverine are tied.
yeah, and I think a lot more of Jackman's are just cameos compared
Mm-hmm.
to Downey's. Is Downey's only cameo the Incredible Hulk?
I think so.
Everything else is insignificant because a lot of people thought his part in Homecoming was going to be smaller, but he's very crucial in Homecoming.
Fuck, I think you could go on record knowing that the movie is called Captain America Civil War. You could almost consider Tony the villain of Civil War.
Yeah, I've always loved that.
Mm-hmm.
It's especially interesting when you're when you're Team Tony.
Mm-hmm.
Then it's like then it could be Captain America's the villain of his own movie if you're Team Tony.
Mm-hmm.
So either way, it's amazing.
Mm-hmm. And that airport scene is just such a lead into. It felt so massive at the time, and then when you get end battles with Infinity War and Endgame, it feels so small compared.
And I love how many callbacks there are to that airport scene because isn't there's a moment in Endgame when T'Challa approaches Barton and he calls him Clint.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like I was thinking that was that a reference to is it the airport scene in Civil War when like I can't remember exactly what it is now. I think Clint introduces himself and Black Panther just says I don't care or something.
Yeah.
And then it's paid off in the middle of the battle in Endgame. And the battle in Endgame has so many of those payoffs
Mm-hmm.
while all the chaos is happening.
Mm-hmm.
And it's crazy how incredibly this worked out. I'm not even like an actual like comics person, so I can't even imagine. I mean, it's been talked about obviously since these movies have been big, but I genuinely just cannot imagine how a comics person feels about the fact that these movies really do exist.
I mean, all you have to do is watch Kevin Smith's review of Endgame, and he spends the last half of it in tears.
Yeah, because Kevin Smith's one of those people where he seems to praise mostly everything constantly. Like he praised Suicide Squad,
Mm-hmm.
but it's when you see him get like you can tell when he's like really in love with something,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not like hey, despite all things, I like this, even though it kind of sucks. Um, you can. It's one of those things where you can tell when people talk about it. To the point that it is one of those things where I don't really like to feel this way because I just get how it works and I've felt this way about other things.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just such an investment when there were people that came out of Endgame saying like, it's okay. That's so foreign to me that you could have such a nonchalant reaction to it if you've been watching them all the way up to this point. Because there's some people that don't care for the Marvel movies, but for some reason keep coming back. And it's
Mm-hmm.
but they won't admit there's maybe a reason they're coming back.
Mm-hmm.
And usually with those people, there's always at least like Oh, there was that one scene that, like, I remember, like people like that who were critical of Civil War and saying like, oh, it's just another Marvel thing, really loved the stairway fight,
Mm-hmm.
like when Bucky takes like the whole railing and like comes down to another level. That's the thing that a lot of action scenes in movies are missing, was the Marvel movies are full of the individual moments within those scenes.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's so many in the fight scenes in the Captain America movies are incredible
Mm-hmm.
in the way they're detailed. Like in the Winter Soldier when they're doing the knife thing, or in Civil War when Tony is this close to getting shot in the face, and it's his hand thing that keeps him from dying. So that's are there any of those that stick out to you? The like those individual moments in the fight scenes?
And just those two are in Marvel in general.
I guess in general.
I mean, also you have in Civil War the end fight between Tony and Cap, and Tony is just welled up with emotion, and he just one line sets it off. He's just like, he killed my mom.
Yeah. Which was always such an interesting moment because it was always all about his dad, all the way up to that point.
Mm-hmm.
And his dad is still the thing in Endgame, where that we get a final payoff to that.
Mm-hmm.
But I was gonna bring up something else.
I still to this day stand by. I would have given Downey a supporting actor nod for Endgame.
I don't think it would have been. I never counted on it happening. I've seen too many awards races at this point.
Mm-hmm.
But it's yeah. I don't know when this is going out, but it's still nominations day when we're shooting this right now. But that's something that I would not have been opposed to. Like I like if that had actually happened, I would say I think that might be warranted.
Mm-hmm.
Because there is the whole thing of I guess this is something I can take to the opening scene of Infinity War. Actually, do you just want to talk about the opening scene of Infinity War in general? Since I'm going to segue there,
Sure.
there's a lot to say about the opening scene of Infinity War.
It sets
um,
it kind of sets the tone for the whole movie.
yeah, one thing I noticed that I hadn't really noticed before was I was like, when it starts and we're seeing the logo, I just kind of got the general gist of the fact that what we're hearing is the Asgardians in distress,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like it's. Have you ever really listened to what they're saying during that?
Bits and
I had to put the
pieces.
subtitle. What's that?
Bits and pieces.
I had to put the subtitles on, and it's basically the guy is begging, saying, you know, we're not a Warcraft. We're normal people. We have families in here,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like that just really it just immediately sets the tone of that he's gonna wipe out anything. Like it doesn't even have to be an opposing force. He's just gonna wipe you out anyway.
Add on to that the fact of the end credit scene in Ragnarok. Everybody that this happened to just became homeless.
Yeah, and that was the thing too, was when that scene happened, because we'd had um like a comedic moment right before that when it was like, oh no, Meek's alive, never mind, and then Ragnarok ended and everybody was happy, and it's like we were saying in the other video about how when I saw Ragnarok in theaters, my complaint was it was too comedic.
Mm-hmm.
Like in retrospect, it being Taika Waititi, it's grown on me. But another way that Ragnarok has grown on me in a big way is that it feels appropriate that Ragnarok is so funny because it's about to not be funny. Like
Mm-hmm.
it was our last shot at like happiness.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'll get into that later. How there's still comedy in Infinity War and Endgame. Many work, and in retrospect, there's also many that don't. But
By the time
but the thing,
by the time you get to Endgame, you just feel so horrible for Thor.
I I love how much Infinity War plays on how much we know about Thor through the other movies.
Mm-hmm.
Like it really shows us the journey that we've been on when it's like he goes through his whole thing, and then when Quill comes in and says, "Oh yeah, well my dad killed my mom, so I had to kill my dad," and it's like they're saying these in one sentence, and these are whole movies we experience, and that turns the whole movie of Guardians 2 that we experienced into one funny line in Infinity War, and it's like there's just something perfect about how that works.
We talked earlier about how Downey is so good at Endgame. From the middle of Ragnarok through Infinity War and Endgame, Chris Hemsworth's excellent too.
Yeah, because the great thing about like the first Thor movie is he gives a great comedic performance,
Mm-hmm.
and his comedy is still on point. When he and Rocket and Groot leave in Infinity War, and he says farewell, morons.
Mm-hmm.
It's like even when he's got these moments that are like you can see there's such a heaviness in him, he still just has like those little line deliveries that still work.
I mean, it's effective to the point that one of his most emotional scenes, he's talking to a fucking animated raccoon, and he's
Yeah,
just like pouring his soul out.
yeah, it's like the combination how we were talking about how he can be comedic, but you were also talking about how he's kind of got that like the weight of everything that's happened in the other movies and his tragedy overall is
Mm-hmm.
in him. It's like even when he's saying comedic lines like he's never fought me twice
Mm-hmm.
is a comedic line, but you can still hear the pain in his voice from what he's just told Rocket.
Mm-hmm.
And the way it sets him with Thor when he's explaining everything that's happened to him, it's almost even though we were there to experience it with him, it's almost like it's dawning on us also. Like, yeah, that's a lot to happen to one character.
And the path that he ends up taking in Endgame is perfect because he he ends up being the cause of the snap because he was being arrogant. So it's like just as he got his self-esteem back, it was ripped away from him again. It's no wonder he became a reclusive drunk.
Yeah, because that's the interesting path that Endgame takes is especially in movies like this that are literally their thing is hero versus villain,
Mm-hmm.
and the whole formula of hero versus villain is when the villain dies, everybody triumphs.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like this is such an interesting case of seeing such a big hero character go into depression after he's killed the main villain.
Mm-hmm.
It's like because obviously one of the things I remember vividly and always will from any of the moving goring experiences I've ever had in a theater is that just complete disbelief that they kill Thanos in the opening 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody's like I can imagine going to like an event screening. Surely people at event screenings thought they were being trolled.
Mm-hmm.
Like when it cut to black after Thor walks out after he's decapitated Thanos, they were probably expecting a Joe credit roll.
But what then the payoff, it sinks in once Thanos comes back to the story. It's like, oh, he's such a bastard. We get to watch him die twice.
Yeah, we get to watch them all die twice.
Mm-hmm.
Which, by the way, is perfect vengeance for Vision,
Mm-hmm.
which I've always thought was nice in like a symmetrical way.
Mm-hmm.
Vision got symmetry twice in a payoff because he ended up being killed by Thanos twice, or he got to die twice, but was killed by Thanos the second time. And then Thanos got to die twice.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also the whole thing in Infinity War when he and Wanda are just like out and secluded, and he gets impaled by what's that guy's name? Corvus Glaive.
Mm-hmm.
And then during the end battle, like shortly before Vision's death scene, is him impaling Corvus Glaive in return.
Mm-hmm.
It's like Vision's all about that symmetry.
Which is perfect for Vision because he's such a perfect being.
Yeah.
One of my favorite Vision moments is in Age of Ultron when he just picks up Thor's hammer like it's nothing and just hands it to him. And everybody just stares.
Watching WandaVision, it didn't even occur to me because they were talking about in WandaVision how Ultron killed her brother
Mm-hmm.
back when he was Aaron Taylor Johnson. And it's like as many times as I've seen Age of Ultron at this point, now that they're so romantically involved, or were so romantically involved, it only just dawned on me watching WandaVision how appropriate it is that Vision is the one that killed her brother's killer.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like it all adds up in a way that I'm still seeing, no matter how many times we've already seen these
I
movies.
still love the miniature payoff too. That after Tony's funeral in Endgame, we were going to talk about the beginning of Infinity War, and we've branched off. But at the end of Endgame, after the funeral, Clint and Wanda have a moment together where Clint pretty much apologizes about Vision, and it's perfect that it's those two because Clint's the one that gave her the pep talk in Age of Ultron and said, "If you go out that door, you're one of us now."
Yeah. See, this is why, because like I was saying when we started, I feel like I've done so many videos on the MCU movies,
Mm-hmm.
but yet there's still always new stuff to go back to. Like, I don't really remember what all we said in the retrospective. That's like a 3-hour video or something.
Mm-hmm.
So we may have covered a lot, but I still feel like there's so much stuff that I'm still noticing for the first
Mm-hmm.
time. Because I rewatched Infinity War and Endgame for the first time since I think the last time I watched Infinity War was right before Endgame came out, and then the last time I watched Endgame was right around the time it came out on Blu-ray. When I got the Blu-ray, I watched it again.
Mm-hmm.
So I watched them both again the other day, and that was the first time. So in probably a what a year and a half maybe.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'm still not quite sure where I land on the whole. I mean, maybe I do like Infinity War more overall because there is some stuff in Endgame where it's kind of it's sort of like the way I feel about it's a weird comparison, but sort of like the way I feel about Inception, where when you see Inception for the first time, it's amazing, but then
Yeah.
once you get the gist of what's going down, the first hour of Inception is almost skippable
Mm-hmm.
because you're like, yeah, I know what all this is, and you just kind of want to get to the meat of it eventually because you don't need the exposition anymore because you know what the concept is and how everything works.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like a lot of, like the whole stuff where they're designing the time travel in Endgame kind of feels like that. I mean, they put comedic stuff in there, like when Scott turns into a baby and stuff like that. A lot of the individual character moments, like Hulk giving Scott the tacos.
Mm-hmm.
But I love the perfection. It's such a perfect comedic moment that all the stuff in Scott's taco flies out of the shell, but the shell stays in his hand. It's like, I don't know. I mean, it's probably CGI, but my first thought was, how did they even do that?
See, it's funny. You think it's like, oh, I could just skip the first half of Infinity or of Endgame and just get to, you know, the fun stuff when they start time traveling. But even then, like it does feel like it's an hour of moping, but you still would miss so much. You would completely miss Tony's relationship with his daughter
Yeah.
and him and Cap repairing their relationship when he brings him the shield back. You you don't you don't get the reveal of Hulk. You would miss Korg and Meep, which how the hell did they survive that ship explosion?
I, I want to say I love the fact that we're just to go with that they did.
But you would miss seeing like Thor's initial depression where he ultimately, was the cause of Thanos' demise, but he can't even bear to hear his name. So I mean it does feel skippable, but at the same time, you miss a lot of little character nuggets in there.
Yeah, I do. Well, I do think one weakness would be some of the dialogue. Maybe could be better.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the main scenes that comes to mind there is the interaction between Steve and Natasha.
Mm-hmm.
Like the line, she tells him like if he says something, he's gonna get hit in the head with a peanut butter sandwich. lines like that leave a lot to be desired.
Mhm.
And I don't want to be one of those people that harps on like one line,
Mhm.
but just kind of in general, I feel like there should have been more there, especially with the camaraderie they've had since Winter Soldier.
Mhm.
But I feel like there's something about that scene that's just kind of lacking, despite the fact that these are characters we already know are close.
They're OGs.
And this Endgame did clear up something that a lot of people had, which I'm assuming, which makes me curious where else we're going to go with this, because I think he's another person that's getting a series. Is a lot of people, especially when the first Avengers came out, complained a lot that Clint was underutilized.
Mhm.
Clint's got so much going on in Endgame.
He flies off the reservation too.
You could write about, like, somebody who's never read a comic in their life could probably write a Clint Barton biography just on what happens to him in Endgame.
Mhm. And he is getting his own series. It's about training Haley Steinfeld.
All right, I could see possibly
Mhm.
what they could do with that.
Mhm.
And well, that's the thing though, is when people were talking about the series, this is gonna bring us back to the opening scene of Infinity War.
Okay.
um, at first, I wasn't sure about the series stuff because it was like WandaVision sounds like an interesting idea, but Vision's dead. What are you gonna do? Sort of like the fact that Black Widow's movie is gonna be like an origin story, and it's like, is it gonna be weird to get an origin story for a character we know is already dead?
Mhm.
And then it's like, and the Falcon and the Winter Soldier might be a nice idea, but I guess we'll see. But WandaVision has like really set up like after WandaVision, I'm like pumped for the Falcon and the Winter Soldier.
Mhm.
The thing I'm
From the
curious
previews
about,
and stuff that I've seen, it's gonna be a lot like Winter Soldier.
that's a really good song.
Yeah.
And like I said, they're even taking the I don't know how many Marvel fans are familiar with this movie, which is clearly the inspiration for its title.
Mhm.
And this is kind of the same stuff that was in the same vein as like 3 Days of the Condor, which was a huge inspiration for the Winter Soldier itself. Um, so if they keep, to my understanding, I heard it's basically going to be like an action comedy.
Mhm.
But it'll still be interesting. But the direction I
It's
want to go,
kind of what I've got from it, almost like a 70s like spy thriller mixed with a buddy cop movie.
that would make sense. And I like how much they kind of built towards that, because it felt kind of like, it always felt like tonally off in Civil War when things were getting like so friendly with them.
Mhm.
Because like as the stakes were raising, it was like there was a lot of comedy stuff like can you move your seat up?
Mhm.
It was always like, is that necessary? But it's like, if it's building to this, then it's all gonna. It's like the way everybody was like, fuck Thor: The Dark World,
Mhm.
and then when Endgame happened, it's like, oh no, we need Thor: The Dark World now. Like, it makes it like later projects will make everything relevant.
Mhm.
But the direction I was going, that's going to bring us back to the opening scene of Infinity War, is there is one show. I mean, given everything else, I'm sure it's probably going to be fine. But one show that I kind of, when I heard about it, was Loki,
Mhm.
and a couple of things. Number one, um, I loved Loki as the villain in the Avengers, the first Avengers
Mhm.
movie. Like he's like the Avengers movie. The first Avengers movie is that movie. Like, it's that whole movie, and Loki might be my favorite aspect of it. That whole movie,
Mhm.
and it does make sense that because he and Thor have this Shakespearean tragedy going on. So, so like you might say Shakespearean is stretching it, but there is a reason Kenneth Branagh directed the first Thor movie.
And it's kind of funny that you say that, because then in Ragnarok they pay off the Shakespearean aspect of it by giving it a theater setting.
Yeah. and that's the thing is, so like usually I hate when a villain eventually goes good.
Mm-hmm.
But number one, the fact that he never does that in the Avengers is a plus. Like he stays a villain through that whole movie.
Mm-hmm.
He only kind of starts coming into the light when I guess it'd be Ragnarok, because in the Dark World it seems like he's going good, but then the final reveal is that he's bad again.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what's interesting is that that's just the character. Like the whole point of the character is that he flip flops. It's not just the writer doing some "hey, I'm trying to fool you" thing. Like that's just literally his character.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Even in the beginning of Infinity War, like Thor's trying to tell Thanos, we don't have the Tesseract, and Loki just pulls the butthead from Beavis and Butthead to America and just goes, here you go.
and even in that scene alone, the way it goes back and forth between, oh, he gave up the Tesseract, and oh, he wants to be his god, what an asshole. And then 10 seconds later, he's literally sacrificing himself to try to kill Thanos.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the part I want to talk about.
Okay.
I should have known. We all should have known. But I remember, and there was still reservations in the back of my head because we know these movies. It was such a big moment. Like after all the flip-flopping and all the fake-outs, it was a big moment in Infinity War that just really set the tone when Thanos killed Loki and said no more resurrections this time.
Mm-hmm.
That was the moment where it's like, we're not fucking around now. And I know the loophole here is that technically that Loki is still dead.
Mm-hmm.
So technically it's not a resurrection by definition, because if I kind of assumed this, but I can't remember if I got any confirmation or not. I'm assuming the Loki we're following in the series is the one that escaped in Endgame's 2012.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that is a way into the series, but it just really craps on the no resurrections this time.
Yeah, but
I
then
know it's technically not a resurrection, but
at the same
I just
time,
love that moment. I love that moment as is.
yeah, but at the same time, isn't it kind of a character moment that Loki yet again finds a way to worm his way out of death?
I guess, especially just the way we see him, like he does the whole thing, but it's like it still feels like he's sneaking off, even though he just vanished. Like if you want to portray like the god of mischief, they did that as well as they possibly could. And I love Hiddleston's performance throughout the whole franchise. I mean, I just said this, but I'll say it again. He's so fucking good in the first Avengers movie.
Mm-hmm.
But I still feel a little tainted about how much I love that Thanos line at the beginning of Infinity War. But
It definitely also sets the tone that the movie opens on Thor pretty much beaten down, and then Loki gets to drop the "We have a Hulk" line, and within 10 seconds, Hulk's done.
yeah, how great of a payoff is that? Like when we saw the first Avengers movie, did you ever foresee 7 years later, we'd be watching a movie where Loki says that
Nah.
line? I never would have. Remember when the first Avengers movie came out and we saw Thanos for the first time? 99% of us said, "Who the fuck is that?"
Mm-hmm.
And now look where we are. And that's another great segue to something I wanted to bring up, because I think I mentioned this when we did our big video, but I just feel like it's worth mentioning. Thanos as like the main villain up to this point, like from the first Avengers movie to Endgame, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody made a comment right after Infinity War came out that has just really stuck with me. And the fact that it still holds true, I think, is why I feel the need to mention it every chance I get. Is maybe you'll remember me saying this before. There was a guy that made a comment after he saw Infinity War, like right when it came out, and he said that he was old enough that he saw A New Hope in theaters in 1977. Like he saw it right when it came out,
Mm-hmm.
and then he was saying that in that moment, in that, like the opening scene of Infinity War, where we see Ebony Moss stepping over the bodies and doing his whole thing, and then it pans over and Thanos is there, almost like silhouette, and we see how huge he is, and he has the "I know what it's like to lose" monologue that goes all the way up to him saying "I am here," and he raises the gauntlet.
Mm-hmm.
This guy that's old enough to have seen A New Hope in theaters in 1977 said that introductory shot of Thanos, it, the way he felt seeing that scene was the way he felt in 1977 when Vader stepped out for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big fucking statement.
Mm-hmm.
So is this? Do you have some praise for Thanos and Brolin and everything?
It's I'll make the same argument that I made with Cable. Brolin was such a boring choice, but not because Brolin's boring, but because you knew Brolin was gonna be good.
Brolin's on that Bryan Cranston level now.
Mm-hmm.
And
Even if Brolin's in a movie that's not that great, you know Brolin's gonna bring it.
yeah, are you at that phase now where he was only the voice of Guardians of the Galaxy Thanos,
Mm-hmm.
but it's like after Infinity War and Endgame, when you remember Thanos and Guardians of the Galaxy, is your memory just programmed to see Thanos as he looks now with the motion capture?
Pretty much. And the thing that Brolin does so well too is he's as Kevin Smith put it, he's a cartoon. And Brolin brings out so much emotion in the way he delivers Thanos' lines.
Yeah, and it's also a case where you can tell the physicality is actually him.
Mm-hmm. One of my favorite Thanos lines, actually, is when Gamora is trying to convince him that she doesn't know where the Soul Stone is. And he actually says to her, you know, I taught you all of this, but I know I didn't teach you to lie. That's why you're so bad at it.
Yeah, because like I said, it being a whole, I think it's a stretch. A lot of people like to say that Thanos is the lead of Infinity War.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's clearly an ensemble thing, and he's clearly the villain. But I always felt like that was a stretch. But I do get like how much of his story we do get, and I love the fact that it's like it's another thing that feels like it could just be backstory, but it's not.
Mm-hmm.
Like the whole thing where we get the backstory of when he found Gamora and how he took out her planet, and you still got Ebony Maw there being his hype man and all that. And it's this whole thing where it's setting up their relationship, and then because it kind of goes back to her, she's kind of remembering this and realizing like if this is when I think it's that leads into the moment when she tells Quill like there's something that I know that he can't, so be sure to kill me if it happens to come up.
Mm-hmm.
And it just establishes their relationship. But the reason that's the perfect segue is that yeah, in pretty much any other movie that would just be serving as nothing more than backstory.
Mm-hmm.
It's like this is how we came to be. This is why I hate him. This is how I got my weapon, etc. The whole thing is setting up the Soul Stone thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's its real purpose.
Mm-hmm.
But
And you can tell that the things that she says matters to him, because the scene where they see the chair and she's like, I hate that chair, and he's like, so I've been told. Like, it's like a dad dealing with his daughter. And the fact that he shows her the respect of not sitting in the chair to talk to her, but sitting on the steps.
I love that detail.
Mm-hmm. It's like he's mad at her for lying to him, and he's mad that she turned against him, but it's like he never loses his respect for her.
Yeah, which also goes in line of how Nebula is basically the black sheep.
Mm-hmm.
that was set up really well in Guardians too. Like I was saying, like I didn't care for Nebula in the first Guardians, and
Hmm.
I hated Karen Gillan as an actress. I just thought she was a terrible, because I'd seen her in a couple of other things. I was like, she's just a terrible actress.
Hmm.
And then Guardians 2 made me love Nebula and Karen Gillan. Like
I love
Guardians 2 was a complete turnaround for Nebula for me.
I love the opening scene of Endgame when her and Tony Stark are playing paper football.
Yeah, that's another one of those ones where it's like when you're going into Endgame, it's like who's going to interact with who?
Hmm.
It's going to be so interesting to see, and the fact that that's like the first one, it's like yes, this, and then when you see them work, yeah, this somehow makes perfect sense.
Hmm.
And the fact that she's like, while he's literally dying and she can't, is such an
Hmm.
interesting dynamic going on.
Hmm. You get a lot of fun interactions of Stark with people that you didn't know that you wanted him to interact with, like the scene in Infinity War when they first meet Star Lord and Stark, and Star Lord's being dumb like he usually is. He's like, "I'm from Earth. I'm from Missouri." And Stark's response is just, "That's Earth, dipshit."
I think what makes that even better is if I remember correctly, when Tony says that's Earth dipshit, he's not on screen. Like the camera's still on Quill.
There's a lot of fun little moments like that, like when Spider-Man meets Doctor Strange for the first time, and he says, "I'm Peter." He says, "Doctor Strange." Oh, we're using the made-up names.
Yes, because as somebody that wasn't familiar with comics, before I went, I guess before the reference in the Winter Soldier, um, I wasn't aware that Doctor Strange was his real name. Whereas I was drawing a blank on that damn guy's name. The dude that's the Hydra agent in Winter Soldier that
So
worked for Shield. I completely forgot his damn name. I
I
keep
think of
wanting to say I keep wanting to say Sitterson, but that's Bradley Whitford
Sitwell.
and Cabin in the Woods. Huh?
Sitwell,
There it is. I knew it was Sit something.
the one that was up Gary Shandling's ass.
Yeah. So I was trying to think. We were talking about there's something here, and I don't know if it should be. Well, no, never mind. It doesn't get a chance to be prominent, which is clever. But I do wonder because the thing here that starts in Infinity War and continues on, and apparently will continue on in the franchise, is it almost seems instantly perfect. Because I remember, I know I mentioned this in the other videos, I'm sure. When the concept of Infinity War came up, I was always wondering how they were going to somehow combine the Avengers as we knew them with the Guardians, because it seemed like it was going to be so much.
Hmm.
Like it's like you can say these movies are long at 2.5 for Infinity War and 3 hours for Endgame. It's a miracle they're not longer with everything we have going on.
And it doesn't feel like anybody got gypped.
Yeah, you can absolutely say the same thing for Civil War. I think everybody agrees it's basically another Avengers movie.
Hmm.
It just happens to have the Captain America title.
Hmm. You're only missing Thor and Hulk.
Yeah, and that
But then
and I
even
think that
then,
goes
they get their own adventure.
yeah. It's so weird how I didn't want to go this route, but yeah, it's perfectly balanced as all things should
Mhm.
be.
And
Oh,
it's also nice too, like in Infinity War when Bruce learns that the Avengers broke up, like that could easily be something that's just explained, explained, explained. But the way Stark is just very sufficient. Yeah, this happened.
that's something I wanted to bring up too. I do want to go back to something, but while we're on this, I'll stay on this. Um, there's a lot of comedic lines in Infinity War that don't work for me anyway,
Hmm.
especially when the stakes are as high as they are right now. Like, there's just not fucking time for it. Like, I know they're nice there, like the first time you see them, and the audience can have a laugh together and all that, but the
By the
scene
end of
when
the movie, they're going to need that laugh.
yeah, but like when they're all at Doctor Strange's place, when Tony gets there and Bruce is there, and we're getting the backstory on that. Wong's giving us the backstory. They go into the whole Ben and Jerry's thing. The whole interaction of, did you just say hitherto undreamt of? That stuff I'm not a fan of, but there is that moment when Tony says, we broke up. And Bruce says, like a band? Like the Beatles? And I think the reason I love that line is that Bruce is genuinely, like, shaken by that. Like, when he's, like, like, it's a funny line, but he's completely serious when he says it. It's like, just so I'm clear, like the Beatles. But the thing I was going to mention about Thor and the Guardians was it once they meet up, it's like, oh shit, of course Thor was our segue for the Guardians to get into this. Like and it's the whole thing where it's the interesting thing that's going on with both Thor and Quill. Like I said, I feel like this is something they could and maybe should have gone into, but it's dealt with by the fact that Quill gets dusted. But we were talking about how a lot of Endgame focuses on Thor's guilt, that he didn't kill Thanos in time.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think there should have been, like I said, there's not a lot of time because Quill gets dusted, but there could have been some way, maybe after the events of like towards the end of Endgame, where, yeah, because we're doing the whole thing where it's the comedic thing where he and Thor are saying, like, who's the real captain or whatever, that goes on for too long. I would like to know where Quill's guilt stands, because they were getting ready to take the gauntlet off of Thanos when he couldn't help but start hitting on him, and that's what fucked everything up.
Mm-hmm.
You could argue and say it's fine that Quill did this because, according to Doctor Strange, this is the only outcome where they win. So it's like, if Quill had not fucked it up, would we be in the wrong pathway?
Mm-hmm.
So, but I would still wonder, like, is there any guilt in Quill over that? Because surely it's, or is he like still so consumed by his mourning that it still hasn't occurred to him yet?
I think that's a lot of it.
Because like I said, he doesn't get much time to even think about it because he gets fucking dusted. but,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, I would have kind of liked to have seen a post-battle scene of him saying, like, oh shit, it's dawning on me that happened. But it's like they have focused on he's still mourning Gamora, especially with now that he's really fucked up because he's interacted with her again since her death.
Mm-hmm.
But then they have to do the whole comedy thing with Thor. But I do think As Guardians of the Galaxy is a really great setup. Like, I remember a lot of people assumed that would be the title of Guardians 3, but I do know that Pratt already dropped that the Guardians are in Love and Thunder.
Yeah, because Batista was posting on his Instagram from Australia at the time they're filming.
So I'm assuming that.
Which, let's not forget, Love and Thunder snagged up another Batman actor as a Marvel villain.
Yeah, God, I can't wait to see that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and then the reverse of that, I'm assuming Thor will be in Guardians 3. I don't know.
I don't know.
I can't remember what we're getting. Love and Thunder first, right? I don't remember the timeline now.
Yes.
I guess
that'll
that'll
be first. Because before Guardians 3 even comes out, there's a Christmas special. It's going to be released on Disney Plus that James Gunn's doing, and James Gunn said you need to watch the Christmas special because it's going to give you some stuff for Guardians 3.
Yeah, I used to be anti having stuff that's canon that's not in the movies, but I feel like streaming has kind of made it. There's kind of a seamlessness.
Did you just compliment streaming?
But this is going to seem like such a commercial, especially with the poster behind me. I kind of really love Disney Plus. Like it is nostalgia central.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was telling you, there was a time where I spent just all day on Disney Plus watching movies that we saw at the drive-in when we were kids.
You know, there was something we forgot to mention about the opening scene of Infinity War that's also weighing on Thor.
Hmm.
You had to watch Heimdall get stabbed to death.
Yeah, I remember saying that when Infinity War first came out was it was so amazing to me that he killed Loki in the same scene, because it's like killing Heimdall alone would have probably been enough of a driving force to get Thor where he was.
I mean, if you look at Thor's timeline, in Thor 2, he lost his mom. Thor 3, he loses his dad and his home. And then we open Infinity War and he loses his brother and Heimdall.
And what's
Like,
really interesting when you look back on it,
it's like they went on a little streak of, yeah, fuck Thor.
yeah. What's interesting about that is when he axes Thanos at the end,
Mm-hmm.
says, "I told you you'd die for that."
Mm-hmm.
When he said you're gonna die for that, that was Heimdall's death.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like you almost forget he's not talking. It's, I mean, obviously he is, but if you're talking about that specific line, he's not talking about Loki.
And there's a little line that's it's blink and you miss it line. And it's when he's talking to Rocket and Rocket asks him if he has a best friend, and he's like stabbed to death. Like he cites Heimdall as his best friend.
Yeah,
Not to mention between Thor 2 and Ragnarok, he lost Jane Foster.
yeah. That was a whole thing in itself, that he's still lovesick.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, the fact that this character started off as almost completely a comedic character just feels like such a massive arc.
Mm-hmm.
It's like that's one of
But
the reasons that I'll always praise Hemsworth as an actor, even when people kind of say like, "Oh, it's just because he's good looking."
mm-hmm.
It's like I also direct these people to Bad Times at the El Royale for
Mm-hmm.
sure.
But what also, but it's almost like they make it up to him a little bit, because Thor gets one of the best movie entrances ever on the Wakanda battlefield.
Well, I'm assuming you've seen all the videos where they changed the music.
Mm-mm.
Instead of the Avengers theme when he lands on. I'm assuming you're talking about when he lands on Wakanda.
Yeah.
Where it plays the Avengers theme when he lands.
Mm-hmm.
And thanks to Ragnarok, a lot of people re-edited that scene with Immigrant Song,
Mm-hmm.
which would have worked also.
Mm-hmm. What do you think of like this big epic moment, and we cut to the Hulkbuster armor and Bruce Banner's head's just sticking out and he's like celebrating that Thor's there?
I know a lot of people don't like that moment, and they think the CGI of Ruffalo's head looks bad. But I don't know. I love the fact that Banner's just kind of like, oh, it's Banner's way of saying, oh, we're good now. All right.
Mm-hmm. And I love how the fact that they get their own adventure in Ragnarok sets them up to have such a close friendship through the rest of the series.
Yeah. Also, another amazing payoff when we see what may very well be the best scene in Age of Ultron, the Hulkbuster scene.
Mm-hmm.
When you see the Hulkbuster scene in 2015, do you ever suspect only, what is it, 3 years later, that Banner's going to be in that?
Mm-hmm. Not to mention the fact that it's because Hulk is too scared to come out.
Yeah, I had heard two, and I still don't know which one's right. I was always under the impression that the reason Hulk didn't want to come out was because Thanos kicked his ass.
Mm-hmm.
But I heard later that the reason was that he was tired of being like Banner's, like being told what to do by Banner.
Mm.
But I think the Thanos thing makes a lot more sense.
I could see both arguments, just because the fact that Ragnarok Hulk starts to show intelligence.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very limited. I love his explanation for how he got there.
What was that again?
he's in the hot tub and he just makes like a crashing motion and says Quinjet.
Trying to think if there was anything else I wanted to. What do you? I guess I've been mentioning this. What do you think of like the comedy lines throughout? Like we'll say in Infinity War and Endgame specifically.
I would give them a pass because so much of the rest of the movie is dark and dealing with loss.
Yeah, because like I said, I like when they can combine them like that. Like when Thor and Quill are trading sob stories.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know what else to say. I know it's calling them sob stories seems dismissive when it's literally that they've had to either kill or watch die their families.
And I know you love the I am Groot, I am Steve Rogers.
Yeah, I think it's really just when there's more important things to deal with, like the one of the opening scenes in Infinity War when they're at Doctor Strange's place does not need comedy lines outside of like the Beatles. Like I
Now,
said, that's just Banner trying to process.
now shifting gears, now that you've seen some of WandaVision, how much heavier does it make that scene where Wanda has to watch Vision die twice?
Yeah, it's what's interesting is it was heavy enough,
Mm-hmm.
and now it's like it just keeps piling on.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I do have to give a shout out to one comedy line, and it is in a moment. No, there are two comedy lines almost right in a row that seem like they're at the wrong time, yet they get me every time.
Mm.
I'm a big fan of Get Lost, Squidward.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, even though this is a very crucial moment and a very crucial battle, I love when he can't get Hulk to come out, and Doctor Strange just kind of side eyes this whole thing, and Tony says, "Dude, you're embarrassing me in front of the Whisperer."
There's another one I have to get your opinion on. When they're in the ship and the Guardians first start fighting Spider-Man, Strange, and Stark, what what do you think of Drax with Doctor Strange's cape on him, Drax screaming "Die, blanket of death"?
I might have a controversial opinion.
Okay.
Please don't hate me. I think Drax and Batista's performance in the first Guardians movie
Mm-hmm.
is hilarious. And I loved the fact that, like, when you see Drax for the first time, he's so unexpected. Like, everything about him is so unexpected. It's great and hilarious.
Mm-hmm.
And that pretty much carried over into Guardians 2, especially his interactions with Mantis. But once we get into Infinity War, I don't know. Like,
You don't like him creeping silently eating chips or Zarg nuts?
I think it goes on a little too long.
I do like how it ends over Mantis just walks in and says, "Hi, Drax," and he just walks off.
Yeah. I do. I like Y as Gamora. That's a good one.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I feel like he's just kind of like the Drax comedy is one of those cases where it gets dragged out for too long and makes scenes longer than they need to be.
What about his scene in the final battle of Endgame where he just jumps on somebody's back and starts stabbing them?
Yeah, because that's what we want to see. It kind of brings back memories of the opening scene of Guardians 2 when he jumps inside the thing and like cuts his way out, which is very cool.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I have nothing against the character. I just think some of his comedy moments drag out a little bit, and I
Mm-hmm.
get if that's the Drax way,
Mm-hmm.
but I feel like that's an easy case where we could have maybe cut some comedy down
Mm-hmm.
because I really feel like the invisibility thing goes on too long.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, another comedy line I like. That's another like sort of. I love the fact that you have to be invested in these enough that there's just quick lines that just come and go really quickly that are references to like 6 movies ago.
Mm-hmm.
Like when Thor is talking about like, you know, a hero of the universe or something, and Mantis' response is like Kevin Bacon.
Mm-hmm.
It's like there's nothing else drawing attention to that. It's just like the one reference to the one scene in the first. That's the first Guardians, isn't it?
Yeah, because I love Thor's response because he says, "I don't know, he might be in the group. It's been a while."
Yeah, that's a great.
And I also love when Peter and Quill are interacting on Titan, and Quill mentions the dance off, and Peter's like, "Oh, you mean like Footloose?" And Quill's response is, "It's still the greatest movie in the universe." He's like, "It never was."
That kind of reminds me of the Highlander discussion in Talladega Nights, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I did feel like one of my complaints about Homecoming was that they seem to be playing up a little too much that Peter was younger to where he considers Empire a really old movie.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't care for that joke, but I think it's a nice callback when he says Aliens is a really old movie. How does that
Mm-hmm.
make you feel? You and Aliens are the same age.
Which battle in Infinity War do you think is better, the Wakanda battle or the Titan battle?
The Titan battle is awesome because of Doctor Strange's contributions. Like the
Mm-hmm.
way they're not only that, the way they can kind of come and go, but the whole idea that the planet's off its axis, so the gravity's fucked up.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think, like I would honestly take that over all the bodies crashing together.
Mm-hmm.
Even though, like I said, the Wakanda battle does have a lot of nice individual moments, like Proxima Midnight's death and stuff like that,
Mm-hmm.
and the Rocket, Bucky teaming. Um, but yeah,
Plus, you
I
get
would say the battle on Titan is really cool, and the fact that Tony gets a moon thrown at him. I mean, there's so much creativity, and I genuinely love the moment when that moment where Quill does his thing and then flips him off and then jumps into another Doctor Strange portal. Like just the whole choreography of that whole thing is so good.
I do love the fact that it's kind of foreshadowing in a way that at the Wakanda battle, like Captain America, the way he like can hold strength with Thanos for a little bit, like intrigues Thanos.
Yeah, there's nothing. Just there's just always. I mean, yeah, in true fashion, it's like Steve just keeps showing how improved he is.
Mm-hmm. And all those moments like that makes it even sweeter in Endgame when he wields Mjolnir.
I know it's interesting how it was such it almost has like such a personal feeling because everybody watching Endgame has their own personal reactions.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like it's weird to think that it's such a cliche now to praise how amazing that moment is. But I mean, it's that because that's one of the big, big moments in Endgame.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's the thing. Like when you hear about people, like that thing where like you want to show movies to people to get their reactions to certain things.
Mm-hmm.
If you're showing Endgame to somebody who's never seen it before, you spend 2.5 hours just waiting to see that. As long as not they know everything, they've seen the scene in Age of Ultron. Like that's the thing is one of the absolute biggest peak holy shit amazing moments in this whole franchise. The setup is just some random party scene in Age of Ultron.
Mm-hmm.
And Age of Ultron is considered one of the lesser tier ones now, isn't it? I mean, it started off like it had a lot of hype, and then the hype kind of died down, and people were like, "Oh, it's not as good as the first Avengers movie," and why did they make Ultron so comedic? And it's like, it's got a lot of problems. But I feel like as the franchise goes on, people are coming back to Ultron, and it's coming like That's pretty much happening to everything in the
Mm-hmm.
franchise the more it goes on.
Mm-hmm. Every time, whenever I would watch WandaVision, because I watched it weekly, every episode, the first thing that Disney Plus would recommend was Age of Ultron. Every time. Does it do that to you too?
I think it might.
Mm-hmm.
And you can even say everybody likes to hate on Iron Man 2 and put it at the bottom of the list. But it's like the more we've gone on, like with like what we saw in Civil War, when we see exactly how Howard died, and then the scene in Endgame when he sees Howard again.
Mm-hmm.
Go back to the scenes, and a lot of Iron Man 2 is his angst in regards to Howard.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like I'd be really interested to go back to Iron Man 2 and watch like just kind of the Howard moments. And how much
Mm-hmm.
because they're really good anyway by themselves when he's just watching that old footage of Howard. But it's like once we have Civil War and Endgame going on, like there's something.
Mm-hmm.
And I said it, and the way that kind of bleeds in, where the connection of Howard and Steve in the first Captain America movie, and how it almost kind of feels like Steve is like picking that up where it left off when he interacts, like specifically the scene in Endgame when Tony brings his shield back.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, I love the way that scene starts, where there's times where Tony's almost annoyed by his intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
He's just like, "You already tried it. Let me guess, he turned into a baby."
What do you, before we move on to Endgame, what do you think of the snap scene in Infinity War when people start disappearing? I know one that hits Susan hard every time is when Spider-Man does.
Yeah, I will say, I'm trying to think about how to say this sensitively
Mm-hmm.
because of who we're talking about now. But I know it was a big holy shit moment because when you see that scene in Infinity War for the first time, you don't know what the hell to think if you're not familiar with the story. And after the fact, like after the emotion kind of wears down and people really get to know the scene well and they're watching the movie over and over again, people started to laugh about the fact that T'Challa says this is no place to die and then just immediately gets dusted.
Mm-hmm.
But now that we're talking about Chadwick Boseman, it's hard to find it funny now. Like it's gone back to the tragedy that it was the first time we saw it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, like most people, I just remember being like, well, of course, I've seen enough movies in general that I was cynical, and I was
Mm-hmm.
like, obviously this isn't gonna stick. Like obviously they're gonna be back,
Mm-hmm.
but it was still a number one. Your thought is okay. Like even if you're one of those people that says, well, obviously they're gonna come back, still your initial thought is, but how?
Mm-hmm.
Like how do you reverse this?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like that's the thing too, where it's like when they said like yeah the big whole basically the whole Thanos confrontation is going to be two movies, and you're like we get the 2.5 hour Infinity War, which feels epic by itself, and you're like oh yeah the second movie is an entire 3 hours.
And
Like
even
it's
then,
and you're like
you think when Infinity or when Endgame starts, you're like, oh, obviously they're going to use the time stone. They're going to do something with time. And then in the first 5 minutes, Thanos is like, no, stones are gone.
yeah. And it's like time travel almost seemed like a cop out. Like it already seemed like a cop out already that we had a prop in the movie that would
Mm-hmm.
service that. And then it's like the fact that we lose that, but it's still time travel. But it's like that's another thing, another movie where everybody was like, it's okay, but a lesser tier Marvel movie. Now Ant-Man and the Wasp is so important.
The end credits scene sets up Endgame.
Yeah, that is so eerie. I love that the last payoff, the last end credit scene in Ant-Man and the Wasp is, it playing the drums.
Mm-hmm.
But it's so eerie right before that when it's the emergency message on the TV.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like it's weird how realistic they made that as like a a historical tragic event.
But going back to the snap scene, which person getting dusted affected you the most? Because I hear Spider-Man and I hear Groot.
I have an answer to that that's not the conventional answer to that.
Mm-hmm.
The one that I think affected me for a different reason than being attached to the character was Doctor Strange.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was like I said, if you're not familiar with the story and you just go into Infinity War, you don't know what the fuck is happening. And so you see Bucky goes first, and then it keeps happening, and it's like, and then Sam goes, and it's like the side characters.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh man, the side characters are all going. And then T'Challa goes, and you're like, what the fuck? And then it's like, and then Quill, and you're like, holy shit, these big ones are like gone. And then when Doctor Strange goes, is when I had the feeling of, is it going to be all of them? Like Doctor Strange was the turning point of how the fuck many are going to die.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because all the big ones are starting to go now. And then Peter's the last one, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, even with Peter, it was like, I remember the time between Peter getting dusted and when Tony's just sitting there was like an eternity, because you're waiting for Tony to go.
Mm-hmm.
Despite the fact that the whole, like, it was like a trade of he stabbed Tony but then let him live. So obviously he wasn't going to, but I remember that moment still feeling like an eternity, just waiting for the next person to go.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, because that's the thing when Doctor Strange says, like, it was the only way, and the camera just keeps lingering on him. You have time to go, no, and then he starts to go. So yeah, based on that, I would say Doctor Strange, but I would also say probably T'Challa, because wait, remember, Infinity War was fresh off of Black Panther,
Mm-hmm.
so that was a big deal. But then it was like, I'm really trying to remember the order. Is Black Panther the first big one to go? Like the one that couldn't be called a side character?
I believe so.
So that was,
because the way that scene's set up, you think it's going to be Okoye.
Yeah. And she really sold it with her horrified look when he goes.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, holy shit.
I think that's what people gets people with Groot is the way Rocket sells it, because he's just like, no.
Did I hear? I mean, it sounds kind of cheesy, but did I hear right that when he's saying "I am Groot" as he's going, like in that language, it's him calling Rocket Dad?
That I don't know. I haven't heard that.
I want to say James Gunn said that,
Hmm.
but I'm not sure, because I heard James, like, obviously the Russos are the credited directors, and Gunn has like an executive producer credit, but I had heard that Gunn basically directed the Guardian scenes in Infinity War, is what I heard.
I mean, it makes sense because they do feel like it doesn't feel like they were changed. Like it feels like it's the characters that we knew. Like even their first scene before they find Thor, like Quill's just jamming to music, Drax is asleep,
Rocket's being greedy.
Yeah.
And annoyed.
Mm-hmm. But I love how the continuation of Spider-Man getting dusted carries over into Endgame, and the first thing that Stark says to Captain America is, "I lost the kid."
Yeah. Trying to think if there was anything else I was going to say about Infinity War. Because I mean,
we always talk about how Ebony Maw is apparently the death that really resonates with Thanos.
Yeah. What's the line exactly?
He says something like, "I assume the Maw is dead. This day extracts a heavy toll."
Yeah.
Because I remember I saw somebody comment on Reddit. They were like, he had to sacrifice Gamora because he couldn't find it in his heart to sacrifice the Maw.
But that's what I was going to go into. Was it's like we don't really have to because we talked about it in the other video, but Ebony Maw's such a cool character, and he's there for so little. Like I was nonchalantly talking about it because I wanted to get to the part where we get the Thanos' introduction. Man, when you talk about building up that Thanos is the villain of villains, the fact that the real opening shot is Ebony Maw just stepping over all the bodies and monologuing is such a. There is another universe where he is a supervillain in his own story, and I honestly would want to see that. Like I said, even the scene when we see Gamora's planet getting slaughtered, and you can hear him in the background, and you get the vibes of, like, it really sets in. Like he has his monologue at the beginning of Infinity War, and then they have the scene with young Gamora. That's when it really sets in. God, how many times have they done this? And it's when you hear Ebony Maw speaking that you think that. His voice is so cool. Like it's not over the top evil sounding, but it's evil sounding. Oh, I love it.
What do you think of what do you think of the way he's dispatched in Infinity War?
It's a little too early for my taste, but and it is. I do think it's interesting that it's Peter of all people that is the cause of it.
With his pop culture reference.
Yeah, this is the guy that's been the spokesperson for all the genocide we've seen. and it's this kid that's like, hey, I saw a really old movie once. And he's gone.
I do love. I know you love the trail off. I love when he's on the spaceship and the parachute shoots out, and the way that he's flying back, it kind of trails off. Whatever the parachute takes him, you just hear him yell, "Oh, come on!"
Yeah. my favorite line there is still, "Mr. Stark, I'm being beamed up." I also kind of like it's interesting how much his lines actually work, but the action scenes are still kind of light at this point, especially since they're away from the danger of the city. Like, I also don't mind Mr. Stark. It smells like a new car in here.
But then he also has that very poignant line where, like, he dismisses it as pretty much saying he doesn't know what it means, but it's very poignant when he says you can't be a neighborhood Spider-Man if there is no neighborhood.
Yeah, I don't like the fact that they made that element where he says, "Okay, that didn't make sense," because it does. I mean, if they want to show his insecurity, I guess, but I feel like the line works without having to like make him backtrack on it. Because I know because he still feels like he has such a small brain compared to Tony.
Which continues into Far From Home. He still struggles with that.
Yeah.
Because these movies are so finely crafted.
Yeah. Everybody's response, every main character's response at the end of Endgame is, "This day extracts a heavy toll." Do you love the fact? Because I kind of do. I mean, it's one of those things where it feels like it'd be such an obvious setup, but we're just kind of not thinking about it because of the way Peter is. He's Mr. Stark to him through every single interaction they have, and then the very last thing he says to him is Tony, as Pepper's pulling him away. Like that kind of, I almost just saying that I got a little feeling in it. But yeah, I had talked about that in I can't remember if it was when I reviewed the movie or when I put it in the top 10 of the year, but the fact that I could equate like a pretty prominent life event with all the movies that came out that had Tony Stark in them, from the Iron Man movies to the Avengers movies and Civil War and all that. Like every time those movies came out, I could have like a significant life event that was like kind of like right there, like in Homecoming. And so it's like for those life events, there was a Tony Stark movie kind of waiting, so it was almost like Tony Stark was there with me through all these crucial life moments.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like I come out of Endgame going, whatever the next crucial life moment is, Tony Stark won't be there.
Mm-hmm.
It's like shit. And it's like that. It's that kind of stuff where you really get to see like how much that like a lot of not so much lately because now it's mainstream to love this kind of stuff. But
Mm-hmm.
back when you were like outcast for being into like comic books and stuff like that before the movies made it like the movies made it to the point that now you're the outcast if you don't like this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
um, but the way people get really, really invested and people like almost revolve their lives around it seems like it would be totally excessive and like, oh, this person's just some weird obsessed fan. But it's like when you really look at it and you can see the way, like I said, like I can equate so many crucial life events to the fact that a movie with Tony Stark in it was there. Like that's the kind of thing that gets people attached.
Mm-hmm.
It makes the characters feel so real.
Mm-hmm.
It's like because you see people get really bent out of shape, and you'll have some asshole say like, "Dude, it's a fictional character," and it's like, yeah, we're all aware that they're fictional characters. We're all aware these stories are outlandish, but it's like there's still just that real quality there if you're invested enough, and
Mm-hmm.
that's so that like I was saying, when I came home after seeing Endgame, I didn't. It wasn't just Tony Stark. I felt like Robert Downey Jr. had died. Like it was such a weird feeling all day because this is something I want to bring up because like I said, you haven't talked about Endgame on camera yet.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the fact that Tony dies.
Spoilers.
When I went into Endgame, I knew that Chris Evans had made it abundantly clear that he was done with Cap.
Mm-hmm.
He made it abundantly clear that he had officially hung the suit up. He made it abundantly clear he was not going to be in another Marvel movie.
Mm-hmm.
When I went into Endgame, I assumed the big tragic ending was going to be Cap dies.
Mm-hmm.
And with Chris Evans building it up like that, I would think nearly everybody had to have gone into Endgame thinking that. Because what I was thinking, and like this is another thing that's like really hurts to say, was after the lead-in Infinity War, I assumed the finale of Endgame was going to be Cap dies, and then the final scene is Tony and Pepper's wedding.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I thought Endgame was going to be when I went in.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that Cap doesn't die, but it makes absolutely perfect sense if we never see him again.
And he gets the happiest of endings.
Yeah. And then the fact that that's balanced with there was like there you could say really how like obviously Thor is a big player in this, but at the end of the day, the top two in importance are Tony and Steve.
Mm-hmm.
And when you go in completely 100% convinced that one of them is going to die, it feels like such a sucker punch that it's the other one.
Mm-hmm.
Like I remember we talked about this when after you first saw it, and we talked like on the phone about it. When Pepper says you're going to be okay,
Mm-hmm.
it's like, yeah, we have the technology that we can fix you. But then right after that, she says you can rest now, and then that's when it sets in like, oh shit, this is real.
Mm-hmm.
I
Not
mean,
to mention the fact that through the movie doesn't do any favors convincing you the other way because Tony ends up with a family.
yeah.
Like he has a reason to stay alive.
And I know in retrospect, some people could say it seemed like the obvious tragic moment for him to say, you know, I'm out, I've got my family, because in any other story, the cliche is that the person that has everything to lose will die.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like you just go in so convinced that Cap's the one that's going to go down.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't even thinking. It was not even remotely in my mind that we could have lost Tony when I went into Endgame. Like, did you have any inkling at all?
Figured it had to be either him or Cap. I figured we were losing somebody major.
And I think the thing also that really misdirects you is that there are so many times that we think Tony's going to die.
Mm-hmm.
The scene where he gets stabbed in Infinity War is a really big moment.
Mm-hmm.
And then the opening scene of Endgame is him, like, what's really wild and so uncharacteristic for movies like this is that Tony doesn't really get last words. Like, he gets the I am Iron Man moment, which is the biggest thing ever. I've noticed his snap is in the logo now when you watch WandaVision.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean,
What do
as
you,
far as like
what
when
do you
he's like,
what do you think of that being his last line in the series?
it's it's maybe it was me caught up in the moment because I feel like an idiot now. But the thing that made that hit so hard, and like I said, I think it was just being caught up in when you're watching Endgame, it's just this constant thing of what's going to happen now.
Mm-hmm.
And your brain is just going all over the place of all you're literally Doctor Strange. You're seeing all the different scenarios that could happen all at once to the point that you can't even register them.
Were you sitting in the theater bugging out like he was in Infinity War? When Mantis' response is your friend okay?
I think her line is, does he often do that? But so I was so caught up in it. He got to I am. I was so caught up in it, I didn't know what he was going to say. So it's so obvious, but like I said, my brain was just so, what's going to happen? What is happening? What's going to happen when he does it?
Mm-hmm.
And then he says Iron Man, and it's like, it's almost like this indescribable moment of, yes, like that is everything right. That is everything as it should be. But yeah, but then like when he's actually dying is when people usually get their last words.
Mm-hmm.
And he's just so fucked at that point. He doesn't even get last words.
Mm-hmm.
So like his dying words, like the message he leaves for the funeral.
Mm-hmm.
So while technically that is, I like to think that his chance at last words, interestingly enough, are the opening scene.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like he's getting them in ahead of time. And it's, yeah, but it's all just right. What do you think about? Do you have anything else on Tony's death?
I just love that we even get the payoff where at the funeral, Happy asks his daughter what she wants and she asks for a cheeseburger.
That's one of those things where you don't know what line hits you the most. If it's her answer, or if it's when he says your dad likes cheeseburgers, or if it's when he says I'm going to get you all the cheeseburgers in the world. They
Mm-hmm.
all just, so like a lot of people made a reference. I think even Kevin Smith made a reference to this. That's like, it's like the perfect take on the Jack scene at the end of Terms of Endearment. That's
Mm-hmm.
exactly what it is. But yet it has its own, like, because we know the first thing he did when he got home in Iron Man was go to Burger King.
Mm-hmm.
And it goes all the way back. And the fact that Happy is the one that we see, because Favreau's the one that gave us Iron Man, the first movie.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, in the movie, we're watching Happy lose his friend. And it's like, knowing that Favreau directed the first movie, it's like we're simultaneously watching Favreau lose his child.
Mm-hmm.
And there's just so many layers of sadness and loss. Favreau's so good in that moment. It's such a brief scene, but God, it works. And yeah, we've I'm sure we've praised the, well, we haven't because you haven't really talked about it, but the funeral scene in general. You know, because I think I love the fact that the first thing everybody assumed was, with all those schedules, there's no way that's not a trick shot.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's multiple scenes spliced together. It has to be. They made it a specific point to make a statement to say, nope, everybody was there all at once,
Mm-hmm.
which is insane. They even brought Harley back, the kid from Iron Man 3. A lot of people don't recognize who he is when they watch the funeral scene the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And yet it's so perfect also.
And the fact that they bring back the proof that Tony Stark has a heart thing to like send out into the water.
So many callbacks to the first movie that are just. And I guess this is something we weren't able to discuss before. And it's, once again, I don't really know how you can really talk about it sensitively, but isn't there just a new sort of tragedy to the funeral scene when we get to T'Challa? And seeing Chadwick Boseman at a funeral, knowing what we now know Chadwick Boseman knew at the time.
Yeah.
And it's so, because I know, because a lot of people, well, because the whole thing was, to my understanding, to keep things under wraps, when they got the whole cast together for that scene, the ruse to the cast was it was going to be a wedding scene.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure how long that lasted, because you can absolutely tell they all know they're at a funeral. I feel like, for some reason, one of the things that really stands out to me is Quill.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the way Quill almost looks uncomfortable when he's looking at the ground. Like, there's always that person at the funeral, in any funeral.
Mm-hmm.
And I just feel like that's such kind of a realistic detail, just kind of the way he's, like, he almost seems like he's uncomfortable being there.
Yes, but you could also harken it back to the first Guardians where he ran away from his mother. So he never got this with his mother.
And, not stated explicitly, maybe that's where his guilt's setting in.
Mm-hmm.
That he started hitting Thanos at the worst fucking time.
I think another person that sells the funeral scene, and this is more when they're doing the reading, is Rhodey.
Yeah. Cheadle had so much to do, because if you go to Cheadle, because obviously Cheadle is long since an accomplished actor.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's so many like complicated things as far as acting goes that Cheadle can probably do in his sleep at this point.
Mm-hmm.
But just think about looking at it from an actor's perspective from Cheadle. That the way he's going to have to act for the funeral scene and Tony's death scene in general.
Mm-hmm.
Being as, because you go back, because a lot of the times I like to imagine Terrence Howard's Rhodey there. When you think back to the first movie, and like think about him and Terrence Howard's chemistry in the first movie, and then jump to the scenes after Tony's dead, and we look at Rhodey. And it's even though Cheadle's obviously the bigger payoff because he's the one that's been consistent. But like I said, there's so much going back to the beginning on this. It's like I like to imagine Terrence Howard in those scenes sometimes, just to get that whole full vibe of it.
Mm-hmm. What do you, or is that all we were going to touch on with the funeral?
Like I said, the next direction I was going to go was what your thoughts are on the fact that Scott is so crucial in Endgame.
Let's just talk about the fact that supposedly Paul Rudd is 51. I'm really buying into the theory that Paul Rudd doesn't age.
Yeah, there's a small group of people here that fall into that where it's getting eerie at this point.
But it is, because like when you first get Ant-Man, he's starting with the casting of Paul Rudd. He is straight comedy, but he's so important.
I want to be a fly on the wall when the meeting where Paul Rudd learns he's going to be that important in Endgame.
Mm-hmm.
I really want to know what his reaction was.
What do you think of the fact that outside of Ant-Man, Rhodey, and Nebula, that the ones that are left to pick up the pieces in Endgame are the original six?
Yeah, I guess I guess that's something I'll be interested to get your opinion on.
Hmm.
Um, we talked about how big of a moment it is that Tony dies. Do you think there's something lacking in Natasha's death? Because I don't know if it's because obviously the deaths. I think another thing that makes Tony's death so unbelievable when it happens, and like we immediately go into denial, is that there's so many elements at play here now that death shouldn't matter, that things can be fixed.
Mm-hmm.
And then they just kind of throw lines out there to just say no, it can't be fixed.
Mm-hmm.
And some people might think that's convenient writing. Like they try to explain some certain things, like when Clint's saying that Red Skull just that's just what Red Skull said was it can't be reversed.
I love that in his anger, like he suggests, like, you go talk to him. What do you think? Speaking of the snap and death scenes, I haven't seen the deleted scene, but do you feel like that most deleted scenes, while they end up being pointless, that a scene where after Tony does his snap and he talks to his adult daughter would have added to the movie?
Possibly. Is this this may not be something I know about. What is this, like a deleted scene or?
Yeah, there's a deleted scene where after, because you know how after Thanos does the snap, he sees Gamora.
Oh yeah,
There was a scene where Tony sees Morgan as an adult.
that's interesting.
And there was a lot of people that said that to give them kind of a closure, especially since it was building an angle, that they wouldn't have minded a scene where after Hulk does the snap, he sees Black Widow.
Yeah, because that's I think when I was talking about lacking, it doesn't it feel like, I mean, I can't say unceremonious because they certainly react to it,
Mm-hmm.
but it's still it still doesn't.
Hulk even says in the end, he's like, "I tried."
Yeah, I don't know. Something about it still feels like she was so just kind of discarded.
Mm-hmm.
That I can't quite explain because there is one moment in Endgame that I feel like is really eerie.
Mm-hmm.
That makes me feel more than I do after she's dead, which is when they're talking about the Soul Stone and all that stuff, and
Mm-hmm.
Nebula's informing them, and she mentions Vormir, and Natasha just taking down notes just says nonchalantly, "What's Vormir?" And it's like it's eerie because she just so casually like, "What's Vormir?" You could just simply say, "The place where you die."
Mm-hmm.
It's like it's just so eerie to me whenever she asks that question
Mm-hmm.
because of that. But it's like once she's gone, I don't want to say it doesn't really feel like she's missing,
Mm-hmm.
but it just doesn't. I feel like it should have. And I think another thing is knowing that she has a movie coming, even if it's more of an origin story. Like I just keep having these feelings like somehow, some way, they're eventually gonna backpedal.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what it is. Like it's not necessarily that I think Natasha dying isn't part of the stakes, like has no bearing.
Mm-hmm.
I just feel like it's something that was treated so not as ceremonious as it maybe could have been. Despite the fact that obviously there is, emotion, like when we see Clint afterwards and how Clint and Banner are all out of sorts, and it's further adding to Clint's level of loss that's building throughout the movie.
My guess is I wouldn't be surprised if that was addressed in Hawkeye in the series, like how Clint is affected by it.
Yeah, or I can see a post credit tease at the end of her movie.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I just really feel like they're gonna backpedal on it somehow.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like I think that's the tragic thing about Tony's death is it was so incredibly ceremonious. There's no fucking way they can turn back on it
Mm-hmm.
now. And I hope to God they don't. I know he's gonna be like he's coming back to do a voice for that what if thing,
Mm-hmm.
but like I can probably handle that because it's just like just voice work.
Yeah, and all that is that's just like fun little hypotheticals. Like, what if Tony Stark was Captain America and Steve Rogers was Iron Man and stuff like that?
Yeah, but I mean, if they this whole franchise has been so smart about itself, I'd like to think there's no reason Tony would not stay dead. Especially since it's such a big player in the Spider-Man story now.
Mm-hmm. It's like this Spider-Man's Uncle Ben.
Yeah, and that's why it's so the moment in Far From Home when Gyllenhaal makes zombie Iron Man happen. It's literally like we were talking about how personal you could see Tony as a character depending on how long you've been with the franchise.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like when you see the zombie Iron Man moment, not only is it so startling, but it's like it's the Michael Jordan meme.
Mm-hmm.
You can see that and then say, and I took that personally.
That scene, oh man, that scene where Mysterio is just fucking with him is so well done. So well done. But yeah, I could see what you think, where you could think that like Black Widow's death's kind of tossed aside, but at the same time, they're kind of in that mind frame of, we've got shit to do.
Yeah.
Like we don't really have time to process this.
And it also just kind of seemed, I don't know if I want to say contrived, but I mean, like I said, all their attempts to bring her back
Mm-hmm.
just feel very shorthand. Like Hulk just saying, I tried, or Clint saying, Red Skull said no.
Mm-hmm. You talk to him.
I believe he calls him like the red guy or something.
Yeah.
Now, I want to think the people that are there and hear that, their response is basically, with all the shit that we've seen now, I don't even want to know what the red guy is.
What do you think? Oh, before we go any deeper, there's one scene that I want to mention just very briefly. I love the scene at the beginning of Endgame where we see space reflected in Cap's eyes.
Yeah.
I just think that's really cool. Like for somebody that came from the 40s, he probably never thought he'd see anything like that. And I love how his eyes just slowly get wider as it goes on. Like, see,
Yeah.
Steve has seen so many things, but that still like baffles him.
Do you like the arc of like it seems obvious, but like I said, it's just so earned at this point.
Mm-hmm.
One of my least favorite jokes. This is one of those things where everything becomes relevant, even if you didn't like it before.
Mm-hmm.
One of my least favorite jokes in the franchise is the running joke in Age of Ultron when like Tony says shit and then Cap says language,
Mm-hmm.
and that just becomes. And it's like that's basically setting up the fact that Steve's a little bit of a potty mouth in Endgame.
Because he's just so fed up.
Because we get let's go get this son of a bitch. We get you got to be shitting me when he runs
Mm-hmm.
into himself. That is America's ass.
What do you think? What do you think of when his his younger self says, "I could do this all day," and his response is just, "Yeah, I know."
Yeah, I love it. I love that stuff. The stuff that's like really, really earned.
Like
There's even a
it
quick
does
moment.
it does feel like the entire scenes of them being in the older times are just payoffs. It's just a series of payoffs. Like it's almost like a thank you for like, hey, thanks for coming on this journey with us. Like, look at all this fun.
I love that we've been so all over the place. I remember just really, especially when I first heard it. I remember really loving the moment at the beginning when they're going to Thanos, and Rocket's response is, "Who here hasn't been to space?" It's just like a It's like it's so casual now about how like we almost tend to forget about like a shot I always talk about um, from the prequel trilogy in Star Wars
Mm-hmm.
is when we go down underwater with Jar Jar, and it's like we cut from this whole underwater city to up in space.
Mm-hmm.
It's like that cut alone just shows you how vast the setting we're working with is.
Mm-hmm.
And I get that vibe when Rocket so casually at this point says, "Who here hasn't been to space?" And we, as the audience, are just like, we've been there and done that many times. And it's like, oh yeah, these characters haven't done that yet.
some of the going back to some of the comedic lines in Endgame, like, what do you think of Hulk's hatred for the stairs?
That is, I just get a thrill out of the whole thing of seeing those scenes from the first Avengers movie from a different angle.
Mm-hmm.
It's like it's such a triumphant moment when they're all like looming over Loki, and then in the original movie, that's where it ends.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's where that scene ends, and it's like now to just see them just kind of all pile into the elevator.
Which my thing is too is, why didn't Hulk just slide down the building?
It's like the damage is done.
But I love even the fact that he had to take the stairs altered the plot. It's Loki has his own series because Hulk was so pissed about taking the stairs.
Although, right, chronologically, right after the famous ragdoll scene,
Mm-hmm.
it's almost like he repaid Loki by saying, "Okay, you're where you get your own series now."
They even brought back Redford.
I loved that. That was the moment where I was like, they went all out on this. They dragged Redford like because that was the point in time where Redford was like, "Yeah, I think I'm done with movies. I'm just gonna retire."
Mm-hmm.
Because The Old Man and the Gun was going to be his last movie, and that was before. And then it was like like after that movie came out, I was like, well, I guess we're probably not going to see Robert Redford in another movie. And then that's when it truly felt like how big of an event this was to see
Mm-hmm.
that Redford was here. And I know it's still in, like it's not like he came out of retirement because this was probably shot even before The Old Man and the Gun probably.
Mm-hmm.
But to still just kind of see him appear when you think that you're never going to see Robert Redford on a big screen again in a new movie anyway.
Mm-hmm.
It was just like this is everything. Like
Mm-hmm.
we even get
I,
what were you saying?
I was just gonna say, I love that there's even a callback to the elevator scene from Winter Soldier.
Yeah, is his is the context in which Steve says "Hail Hydra" a reference to that one comic
Mm-hmm.
that is supposedly Captain America revealing that he's Hydra? Are we gonna say that? Because obviously that's a pretty like. Are we taking that as like canon or what?
I think the comics explained it and kind of backtracked it, I think.
That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
It's like there's no way they can just go in that direction. But like I said, I don't really know much about the comics, so I don't know. And I know how there's like different directions comics go in, but I don't really know much about that.
We were talking a little bit ago about Chris Hemsworth and his performance as Thor. He even hits a home run in the scene with Rene Russo.
Yeah, I heard a lot of people praise the fact that how much they committed to Fat Thor
Mm-hmm.
because it would have been so easy for they show up in New Asgard and he's got the gut to be just a joke, and then when they go back into action, he looks normal again. But
Mm-hmm.
they committed to Fat Thor. Like he stays Fat Thor.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's still Fat Thor by the end, isn't he?
Mm-hmm.
And it's how wild is it on a number of levels that I mentioned Bad Times at the El Royale earlier, which is a movie he's in with Bridges, interestingly enough.
Mm-hmm.
And then Tony makes the Lebowski reference, and it's like with Jeff Bridges being Obadiah Stane. It's like what's real and what's not? What's in this universe and what isn't?
But I just love like the range of emotions that he goes through, like the insecurity of going to see Jane Foster, and then the sadness of seeing his mom and getting that final moment with her, and then the triumphantness of realizing he's still worthy. Like he runs the gamut in that scene.
Yeah, because it's almost like, I mean, obviously the fans like really know the hammer's meaning will get this, but like if you're just like a regular audience member, you're just freaking out about the fact that he's got the hammer back, and it's almost like a subtext that he's, because like you hear that, you see that, and like people are gonna cheer, and it's like it may be lost in the cheers, his line, "I'm still worthy." It's like he's the fact that he's still worthy as Fat Thor.
And the fact that him bringing it back doesn't even end up being for him.
Yeah. And I love how we're so evolved by the end battle. We get that shot where they like trade up, and he's like, "No, you get the little one."
Does it give you a rush to watch Cap run at Thanos just like swinging the hammer? And then like that whole little sequence of Cap with the hammer, like even ending with him calling down the thunder, is just incredible.
Yeah. It's like it's almost like a painting in itself when he goes at Thanos and he's like in midair. It's like just freeze that image and put it on the fucking wall.
So do we talk about some of the best moments in the end battle? Is there stuff earlier in the movie you still want to hit on?
One thing we missed I want to talk about with Scott, and talking about how crucial Ant-Man becomes, and how Paul Rudd really has to, like, we were talking about the difference between how Paul Rudd is so comedic in general and Scott's such a comedic, he's still a comedic character. And I do think there's more Back to the Future references here than I think need to be. Like that's one of those jokes that gets beat into the ground. And when Rhodes is just listing off all the time travel movies, it's like, oh, this is why this movie's 3 hours. And I also feel like a scene that's dragged out is him asking the kids if they want a picture, because it becomes a whole argument, and then it's a funny moment when he says, "Just take the goddamn phone." We're talking to children. It's like that goes on for so long. I feel like it just would have been funnier and more concise if they did the whole thing of taking the picture with them, and then Scott said, "You guys want a picture with me?" and they just walked away.
Now, going back to Paul Rudd, do you feel like it's a brief moment, but do you feel like Paul Rudd really puts on the acting chops when he sees his daughter growing up?
That's where I wanted to take this. Yeah, because it's weird how we don't see them interact again until the very end, do we?
Nah.
But yeah, that moment, as brief as it is, because it's really that moment where, like I said, they make it feel like this real world tragedy, that you put yourself in her position, and it's like seeing him after that is like she probably was ahead of the game on, like, she's like, holy shit, is everybody just coming back? It's like that's going to be later in the movie, but it's going to feel like this. And I love the fact that he says her name, I think, and she may or may not say dad, but even if that's in there, there's no other dialogue, is there?
He just says, "You've gotten so big."
That's right. Does she say anything?
I think she asked Dad, and I think his response is just, "You've gotten so big." And I think that's it. I think the rest of there's no lines. It's just facial expressions.
Because the way he plays it so well, it's perfectly fine. The "you're so big" line is in there,
Mm-hmm.
but it's also a moment that very easy. Like if you literally just take that line out, it would have had just as much effect with no dialogue whatsoever.
Yeah.
With how well played it is.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't mind that the line is there. So.
Mm-hmm.
Um, as far as comedic lines, I was saying that I don't. I was saying when we talked about our big video how Rhodes's comedy lines don't really work for me, especially in Iron Man 2.
Mm-hmm.
I love Don Cheadle to no end, but I just Rhodey's comedy lines have just never really worked for me for some reason.
What about his idea of strangling baby Thanos?
And I think it's what we were talking about before we turned the cameras on. I think it's the fact that he doesn't say it; he just mimes it. And it's like, take out him listing all the time travel movies, but you can keep the baby Thanos thing because it is a genuine question.
What about whenever he sees Quill dancing around and it cuts to like Quill and we hear him like singing off key and Rhodey's response is just, so he's an idiot.
Yeah, I don't like. I could take or leave Rhodey's line, but I think it's an incredible payoff to the opening scene of Guardians when we get the far away shot. It's really this franchise has you constantly asking what was pre-planned ahead of time and what wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
Like what was planned 5 movies ago, or 6 or 7 movies ago, and what was planned when they were sitting down literally writing the script.
It's almost like, now that you mention it, it's almost like Rhodey took over the pop culture lines from Spider-Man, because he even mentions when they go in to get the Power Stone that like spears should start coming out of the wall.
Yeah, spears with skeletons on them.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, a reference to Raiders of the Lost Ark, which that scene is referencing Alfred Molina,
Mm-hmm.
an old Spider-Man foe.
Who supposedly is going to be in the third Spider-Man movie.
Yeah, I do need to express that real quick. It is getting really annoying. Like it was cute at the start, but everybody pointing out now when other Marvel actors are in other non-Marvel movies together.
Mm-hmm.
It's like almost everybody's in the cinematic universe now. So it's like you're just gonna be doing that with every movie. So can we just not do that? Like it's there was even a moment where um, Samuel Jackson was promoting Glass.
Mm-hmm.
He was answering like social media questions, and they were saying like, "Oh, look, it's Nick Fury, and he's got Professor Xavier," and they're making all references like that. And they're saying like, "Oh, look, it's Nick Fury in this movie," and "Oh, look, Nick Fury this." And Samuel Jackson just right in the middle of it just said, "You know, there's more movies than Marvel movies, right?" It's like, yes, almost every actor ever is in this franchise, and that's not going to stop the more we expand. So, can we kill that joke? I'm trying to fight a volcano with a water gun here, but it's like I'm just I'm just so sick of that shit. It's not funny anymore when every damn buddy has a part in this franchise.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, they are inevitably going to cross paths in other movies. There's no way that's not possible when all of Hollywood is in this franchise. Even people from DC are coming in.
There's one thing that I need. You were talking about Black Widow's origin movie. There is one thing I need to see. I need to see an Ant-Man movie where Michael Douglas wears that fucking old school Ant-Man helmet.
they'll 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 come up with something. Like they'll like if there's something you want to see in this franchise, they'll come up with something.
So do we go to the end battle now and touch on some of the highlights?
Let me see if there's anything else I wanted to mention here. Um, that might be it. Um, yeah, mainly just I was talking about all the emotional bits that Clint has, like we see his post-snap life, and then he's the one that gets to do the test run. When he kind of gets to see his family again, but not see them at the same time. And then Natasha's death. So like Clint goes through the ringer on this one.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, are we see that's when I didn't know about the Haley Steinfeld thing. But what I was thinking, there was talks about the fact of if the Hawkeye show would touch on his post snap life as I can't remember the name, that he has like another character,
Ronan,
like assassin, but I can't remember what it is.
Ronan.
Yeah, well, that's not confusing at all.
He's Ronan with an I. Lee Pace is Ronan with an A.
That's like how the Guardians cast is gonna make everything confusing. Like how Jaimin is obviously in Guardians and Captain Marvel, yet he can't stay out of DC because he's in Aquaman and Shazam.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, but yeah, I don't think a line that I only caught just recently was and I don't know why I only just caught this. The "You can rest now" line.
Mm-hmm.
The way, no, maybe I do know why I didn't catch it. It's because her saying "You can rest now" is the sign of, hey, we're not gonna, try to go through some loophole. We're not gonna cop out. We're gonna let you die.
Mm-hmm.
But I only just recently it's a callback to the scene when he tells Pepper that he figured out time travel, and she says, "Maybe if you do this, then maybe you can rest."
Mm-hmm.
It's like I don't know why that line never came back to me in the end scene. Like I said, maybe I do because there's a lot to take in that last scene. I wasn't thinking about stuff Pepper was saying 3 hours ago.
And I love that they have Tony have like a real life dilemma in that scene. Like he's like, I can just throw this in the bottom of the lake and no one ever has to know that we could do it.
Yeah, it's so well played by Downey when he realizes he figured it out. Like there's something so real about the way he says shit.
And then as a parent, it is totally realistic that he would have got busted saying that.
Yeah, talking about all of Tony's human moments, I do also love the stuff just like go to sleep or I'll sell all your toys. By the way, as if Tony needs the money, first of all. Can you imagine Tony Stark having a yard sale?
I would imagine there was a lot of stuff that would end up out there that he didn't mean for it to.
So I think that does bring us to the final battle.
Mm-hmm. What are some of your highlights besides the ones we talked about?
One that I love, like one that's like chill-inducing.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people, we won't go into all the stupid reasons, but just in general, there's some people that don't really care for the character of Carol and how they think Brie Larson's performance was kind of flat and the character was kind of flat or whatever. God, I get it is like chill inducing when everything's going on and it looks like they might lose, and then suddenly the ship's guns start pointing to the sky and you hear them say something's entered the upper atmosphere. And you know what's coming, and it's like that's one of the ultimate holy shit moments of the entire franchise.
And it's one of the only shots we get of Thanos where he's in kind of a mild panic.
Yeah. It's like, and I know the anti-Carol people love the moment, but even people who are fans of Carol can also love the moment. It's just a fight moment when they're fighting and it looks like she's about to beat him, and he is at the Power Stone. He just pulls off the gauntlet and then just punches her.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously,
That's the last punch Thanos throws before he throws down with Iron Man one last time.
Yeah. Yeah, because obviously they had to be careful with how they use Carol, because it's like you bring Carol into the fight, and it's just unfair. And it's like, and it almost seems like it makes sense, but it also seems like you can tell they're dancing around that when she says, there's other planets going through, the same thing or worse.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's the way she just says, I might be gone for a while. Feels like the script talking to us as the audience is saying, this is why she's not in it very much. But then her being gone makes that payoff all the more, because you almost kind of forget about her.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you need her the most, and all she has to do is fly through that fucking thing.
Mm-hmm.
And her interaction with Peter was really good, if brief.
Which kind of leads into the what do you think of like all the women characters banding together?
Yeah, people got so pissy about that, and they thought it would like really drew attention to itself.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, isn't there a similar scene in Infinity War when they're fighting Proxima Midnight?
Yeah.
Obviously, there's not as many of them, but it's.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it also helps that when you actually hear the story, like the reason they put it in, you hear like, oh, it was pandering.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, look at pandering from another side. Yeah, and yes, I've said many times, pandering can be so annoying. I'm looking at you, Ryan Reynolds, Mister. I made my career out of pandering. But
he's gonna bring his pandering to the MCU.
But there are a lot of stories, genuine stories, where parents have come out and said, I have little daughters, and that's their favorite thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, that's why it's there. And I think that's pretty powerful in itself.
Mm-hmm.
So I've never had a problem with it. And I don't think it draws too much attention to itself. It's just that, and it's so brief. It's like, what are people throwing a fit about? It's like what, 20 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
And how long is this damn battle? It's like, put your fucking big boy pants on, for God's sake.
What do you think of the scene where the portals open and everyone comes out?
I loved being in the theater and hearing all the people knowingly react to the very first sign is Sam saying on your left. How does it, by the way, now that we're going into the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, how does it continue? Like, he just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. How does it continue to feel? You just had that casual interaction with Anthony Mackie you did back in 2006.
Now he's essentially Captain America.
It does. And I love the fact that you said that you were there, for context, if nobody knows, you were going to Marshall while they were filming Where Marshall.
Mm-hmm.
And you saw Anthony Mackie walking down the sidewalk with like his person or whatever, and you only knew him as Papa Doc at the time.
Mm-hmm.
He'd also had $1 Million Baby, but Papa Doc was the big part.
Mm-hmm. And
you just said, hey man, it's pretty hot out here to be filming. Like, just chat. You see a guy and you're like, we'll chat about the weather.
Mm-hmm.
And you said that he almost practically stopped and got like chatty.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, when you see him in interviews now and the way he interacts with the cast and stuff like that, it appears he has not changed. When I see him in interviews now, it seems like it's exactly the person you described when you described that encounter. Which, by the way, good for him, because he's fucking huge now.
Mm-hmm.
And if he hasn't changed, then like that's great.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so when everybody comes back, is what can you say about that scene that hasn't been said already? And
The
just does
part the part of everybody coming out, I think that gives me the most chills in that scene is when the Black Panther people start chanting.
yep, that's definitely up there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, God, I get that feeling when Winston Duke shows up in Infinity War.
Mm-hmm.
He starts chanting, I'm like, fuck yes, Winston Duke. And then I love, and that's the point in time where they slipped in a little comedic line, but it's pretty perfect.
Mm-hmm.
It's when they say, "Is this everybody?" and Wong says, "You wanted more." I think another big moment is, like I said, I'm not all over Spider-Man and Holland Spider-Man the way a lot of people are,
Mm-hmm.
but just knowing the reactions when everybody comes in, and like then the Guardians come in, and like Quill's there, and then his mask comes off, and then before he's like front and center in the background, you can see Peter swinging in,
Mm-hmm.
and then he comes into the foreground, and it's like that's a great moment,
Mm-hmm.
and especially since I think the thing that really adds the weight to that, even if you're not as high on Holland Spider-Man as other people are, much as I do really like him, it was the fact that the big emotional moment for everybody in Infinity War was when Peter was dusted.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like he's the big triumphant return for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that we see him go from the background to the foreground is perfect.
I think something that also gets lost in that scene is the fact that Cap was ready to go it alone.
Yeah.
His shield's fucking busted up, but he just doesn't care.
That's a really big moment that doesn't get a whole lot of attention drawn to it for how big of a moment it is that his shield gets destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
But you want to talk about the stakes and showing how big of a threat we're going against, as if we
Mm-hmm.
didn't already know at this point. But
And there's a lot of cool little things going on within the battle. Like, it's very brief. It lasts like 2 seconds, but I don't know why, but I love the shot of like Tony and Pepper fighting back to back, like beaming people.
yeah,
I think that scene's cool. I love Scarlet Witch's payoff that had it not been for Thanos' ship, Scarlet Witch would have ripped him apart.
yeah, yeah. Because there's two things there. Number one, am I weird that Tony Pepper thing is also romantic in its own way?
Mm-hmm.
And then there's also there's the big line that Thanos has when if you watch Spike Lee's Old Boy, it's kind of a weird thing, but we'll
Mm-hmm.
discard that. When Scarlet Witch is approaching him, and she says, "You took everything from me," and his response is, "I don't even know who you are."
Mm-hmm.
It's like that's another one of those double lines where, in one context, it's funny
Mm-hmm.
because he's almost exasperated, like, "I don't even know who you are," but there's also like a cold bloodedness
Mm-hmm.
that he took everything from her and doesn't even realize it because it's just another evil thing that he did.
And adding to Thanos' cold-bloodedness, in the first movie he talks about how he's justified and it's going to be dispassionate and it just needs to happen. And then in Endgame he's just like, I'm going to enjoy fucking your world up.
Yeah,
I'm going to have fun with it.
yeah, because we're dealing with Guardians Thanos,
Mm-hmm.
and the thing, one of the things that we kind of joked about, speaking of Thanos' destiny, is when he when he sees the projection of his own decapitation, and the way he just is like, yeah, that's what is meant to be. Like that's where I was headed. So it's like I can't remember the exact line now, but he's very happy with what the outcome. He's satisfied with what the outcome is because that's the plan.
Mm-hmm.
Is to do what he needs to do, and then if he dies for it, so be it.
Mm-hmm.
If anything, it makes it more honorable in his eyes if he dies for it.
Yeah, because Ebony Maw focuses on the fact that, hey, you're gonna die, and Thanos is like, I'm gonna die because I succeeded.
Which, once again, if you've seen the movie over and over again now, and you play around with scenarios a little bit, me and you had a little fun with the idea of What if Thanos didn't react that way to seeing his own decapitation? Like I said, what if he does the Marv scream in Home Alone? I believe you said the Hank Hill scream.
Yeah.
That's our own version of the what if scenario that they're making a show out of. But yes, it is very cool that he does react the way that he does. But we've seen enough times that we can also have fun with that. But there's something else I was going to mention in the final battle.
Oh wait, before we do that, I love how in the 2000 when we jump back to the 2012 timeline, apparently the Ancient One is helping out fighting, even though we never see it in the original Avengers.
Yeah. I do wish, like, being I guess the big Ebony Maw fanboy that I am, as far as the movie version, I do wish we'd gotten kind of more of a taste of him like we did in Infinity War in Endgame. Because I remember being thrilled when I saw him in Endgame, and it's like, oh yeah, that's right, he can come back. Even though, is he? I may have asked you this in the other video, and I don't remember the answer. Was it, despite Guardians and everything going on, is Infinity War our official introduction to him?
Yeah.
It seems like he should be in Guardians. But once again, this is just a thing now where we can look back on it and say he was just in the background somewhere, apparently. Because we've created like a full picture of all. There are so many full ideas we have of scenes we just didn't even see in the earlier.
I like to think in the end credits scene of Guardians 2 when Thanos gets the gauntlet and he just says, "I'll just do this myself." The very first thing he did was just whip out a phone and call Ebony Maw. And just like it's just him, and he just goes, "Yeah, it's on."
Or he just sends him a text that's just an emoji of the gauntlet, and Ebony Maw knows it's time to leave.
I think what's also interesting about Ebony Maw is you said that his voice is very eerie. He speaks, like his manner of speaking reminds me of like an evangelical preacher.
Yeah. Which makes him even creepier.
You
can almost, like, with the way his, like, whatever he's wearing is designed, you can almost imagine the little white collar. Yeah, because that's basically what he's doing. Like, when he's talking to them, like, he's talking to the people that are being slaughtered, but it's like he's preaching to the people as they're dying that their deaths are a good thing. It's like, it's cult-like. Okay, okay, I need a spin-off movie of Ebony Maw where he's basically got like a cult. I mean, the Children of Thanos, are they not basically their own kind of cult?
Yeah,
they get taken in. Thanos is basically their Charlie Manson. He's just all like, oh, you don't have anybody? Then, I'll take you in. That's literally what he does to Gamora. We see him pull a fucking Charlie Manson right there on Gamora. And it comes full circle because Hemsworth is basically a Charlie Manson figure in Bad Times at the El Royale.
Yeah.
It's just all ties. Like I said, you have enough people in this franchise now, it's all eventually going to tie together anyway. So.
Yeah, and the end battle, like there's just so many callbacks. Like even there's a moment where Hope refers to Captain America as Cap, which is a callback to Ant-Man and the Wasp.
Yeah. That's another thing too. It's like there's so many people here, and how Scott makes it such a big deal that I like the fact that somehow he's lost everything also, but it's like now that he at least has Cassie back, Hope is his big driving force. And it's like when she appears, when everybody else appears, it's for like a split second. But like that's the biggest moment ever for the guy that kind of set off the plan to save everybody.
And he didn't even see it because he was buried under the rubble.
Yeah. That's a great payoff too, that he goes back to I do any of the callbacks to the airport are great. I do love when he's outside of the front gate. That's a great moment too, when they feel like they're completely abandoned, and Steve says, "Is this a recording?" And Natasha says, "It's the front gate." And in the background of that, you can hear Scott saying, "Remember me from the airport? I got really big." as if that's just a thing that happened. But yes, the reveal, and I love that too. That when Scott emerges as gigantic and he's got the rest in his hand, that's after Wong says, "You wanted more." So it's like, even though the joke is we literally have everybody, there's just a few more things they can still throw in.
Let's also add the fact that Hulk is in that battle after snapping, and it affected him so much that at the funeral he has a sling.
Yeah. That's a moment I love too, where it's just a running joke throughout this video. We're going back to the opening scene of Infinity War again. We were talking about how gigantic Thanos looks when he's there. Like I said, if people aren't in the know, they don't realize. Like I wasn't in the know, so I didn't realize. It's shocking in the moment how big. Like you're like, yes, Hulk and Thanos are fighting. Holy shit! But some people are learning in that very moment Thanos' real size when they see Hulk next to them.
And Thanos doesn't even need any stones to beat Hulk.
Yeah.
He hasn't used a stone once. But I also love the fact that, like, in the first Avengers, that big flying caterpillar-looking thing was such an obstacle in the first Avengers movie. And in the very first thing that Scott does in the Endgame battle is just slug one in the face.
I know. You want to talk about the lead in? This is another thing where you can just have fun with stuff now. But this was when it first came out. Like, this is one of the first things I saw after I got home from the movie and was looking up what people's reactions to it were. Was if there's one guilty pleasure that I have, and you'll know I love the Squidward line in Infinity War as a clue. SpongeBob memes always work on me. And it's the moment when it's the start of the battle, when we're not quite sure how it's going to play out, and when Thanos shows up, the first thing he does is just sit down and wait. And they're like, "What the hell is he doing?" And there's a lot of tension there, because it's like, seriously, what the hell is he doing? And immediately, somebody put it with the image from the Hall Monitor episode of SpongeBob, when Patrick says he's just standing there menacingly. And I think about that every time I see that scene now, when Thanos just sits down and waits.
Let's talk about the fact too that Thanos' like helicopter blade looking thing is really badass.
Yeah, it reminds me of it's like Blunt's weapon in Edge of Tomorrow, just two-sided and thicker.
It's kind of like Thanos watched Edge of Tomorrow and then watched Phantom Menace and like married the ideas.
Well, the first time Brolin played Thanos was 2014, which is the year Edge of Tomorrow came out. So.
Aha.
And hey, if you look at the poster above, there she and Thanos are together.
So, I think we've covered the end battle. So I think the last thing that we cover is how great is Chris Evans in the Old Man Cap scene?
Somebody ruined it for me.
Is it the fact that "No, I Don't Think I Will" became a meme?
That, and I was watching a video of somebody talking about it, and they show the picture of old Cap, and just really deadpan, this guy just goes, "Why did Cap turn into Joe Biden?"
Now, this is kind of a softer story, but one thing I remember reading that I think really sells the point is, have you heard the story where Chris Evans' grandma left that scene in tears because she said that Chris Evans looked exactly like his grandfather in that scene.
I hadn't heard that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because obviously now, like I said, it's impossible to not see Biden, which gives me kind of a chuckle. But I think it's because the deadpan way that guy said that was, why does he look like, why did Cap turn into Biden? But yeah, and I think we discussed this after we had both seen it, was it's done so well, and just the way he acts old,
Mm-hmm.
like the way he moves his hands when he's talking to Sam.
Mm-hmm.
It took me a little bit to register because once again, when you see the movie for the first time, your mind's going in so many directions.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you first see Steve sitting down from behind, your first thought is, oh, he's small again.
Mm-hmm.
And you think it's going to be small Steve.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they come around and it's old Steve, and then your brain is processing why that is and what has happened.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God, where was I taking that? Oh, yeah, because my mind was going everywhere and the look is so convincing. There was a little point in time where I was trying to register if it was a different actor.
Mm-hmm.
Because he plays it so well. I mean, it's very obvious now that it's Evans, but
Mm-hmm.
I said the way his voice is and the way he moves, and like I said, he's just sitting down the whole time, so he's not even doing a lot of moving. But what is there is so authentic.
Mm-hmm.
I was convinced for a little bit it might have been a different actor entirely.
Mm-hmm. And the way he delivers his lines, that's such a warm old man. Like when he has Sam try on the shield, and Sam's like, it doesn't feel like mine, and he goes, well, it is.
I feel like I was trying to remember how old he's supposed to be there.
I think it's 105. I also like the fact that Bucky had Sam go up there, so Bucky's last line to Steve is a payoff when he says, you're taking all the stupid with you. And I love how when you watch it back, you realize Bucky knows exactly what he's going to do.
Yeah.
You can tell, you can read it on Bucky's face. He knows Steve ain't coming back.
Yeah, because that was the whole. I mean, it was a thing this whole time, but when you see all the different Steve and Bucky payoffs, there's so many Steve and Bucky payoffs through the whole franchise.
Mm-hmm.
Like the fact that the fight with himself stops when he name drops Bucky,
Mm-hmm.
and then there's the whole thing where that becomes the big player in Civil War.
Mm-hmm.
Where like it starts off with like the politics of it and the Sokovia Accords and all that stuff, and then by the end it's, hey, Tony says, like, look at the series of events. I'm gonna kill Bucky, and the rest of the movie is Steve protecting Bucky from Tony.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, no,
Steve protecting Bucky is what made him a fugitive.
Yeah. And then it's when they were talking about because one of the things in Civil War is when Bucky goes to Wakanda and Steve is there, and it's like when that moment in Infinity War when they're saying, like, how can we do this with Vision, and Steve says, I know a guy, and you can already hear the music and you know where we're going.
Mm-hmm.
It's like my first thought is like, well, that's kind of an interesting, like, we obviously we saw them interacting because Steve was in Wakanda, but it's like, okay, yeah, I guess Steve's in close with T'Challa now, but then it's like, oh yeah, I had forgotten in the moment Bucky's there.
Mm-hmm.
It's like that's his main connection. So is there anything else?
What do you think of the last shot of the movie being Cap getting his dance?
I
To the
feel like
song,
I feel like
to the song that's playing in Civil War when he goes into his apartment and he was told his stereo was left on.
Yeah. I feel like a broken record at this point, but is there any other word apart from perfect?
I don't think so. See, I think that's where Endgame's strength is. I think the better put together movie overall is Infinity War, but the way Endgame wraps things up makes it as big as it is.
As I say, oftentimes it's all about what you leave with,
Mm-hmm.
which could put. Sometimes it's a not good thing, like when a bad movie can convince you that it's better than it is if it has a decent ending.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you leave with. But I mean, the ending of Endgame is an entire 1/3 of its runtime.
Mm-hmm. Plus, I think you can look at Endgame in the way that you can say, it's a last hurrah with a lot of these characters, and they're just going to have fun with it while trying to fix the conflict from the last movie. And I love the fact that they knew the end scene was going to be long, like the battle was going to be long. So you weren't battle fatigued by the time you got to it.
Yeah, that's that was a good goal.
Mm-hmm. Because Infinity War has a lot of battles.
Yeah.
Because you've got the Wakanda battle, you've got the Titan battle, which happens simultaneously. And then before that, you've got the little mini battle with Steve, Vision, and Wanda in Scotland.
I guess you would count the Thanos Hulk fight,
Mm-hmm.
the fight with Ebony Maw in the city streets.
Mm-hmm. The little, I wouldn't really call it a fight, I'd call it more of a skirmish in the ship when they first meet.
Yeah, yeah, I'd go with skirmish. So, yeah, are these the thoughts we go with into a start of a new show?
Mm-hmm.
So, are we? Is that it for this one?
I think so.
We may have to do when it's over. If you want to do like a video by itself on the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, we could probably do that.
Probably. I'd like to get your full thoughts on WandaVision.
Yeah, yeah, I was going to bring that up to you also.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking we'd go into WandaVision while we were on this video, since I'm fresh on it. But then it was like, or it could be its own thing.
We could just do WandaVision next week.
You kind of got almost a vision thing going. Like your skin kind of looks a little red.
Yeah, I don't know why. I haven't been in the sun or anything. I mean, it was sunny when I played golf on Sunday, but I don't think it was like sunburn worthy.
Yeah, we could probably shoot for that while it's still fresh in my mind.
Okay.
Because you were watching it as it went, didn't you?
Yeah.
And it's at some point we're gonna get to that Mississippi burning video I want to do.
Mhm.
But in the meantime, we'll see where this goes. So yeah, so obviously a whole bunch of award stuff is going on now, and we're gonna be doing guild stuff soon. I got some reviews I really need to get out that are really behind. And then I want to watch. There's some award stuff I still haven't watched yet that I should probably talk about. Maybe I'll try to talk about Meg once I rewatch it. I don't know. Now that it's a picture on, but and the lead in a number of nominations for some reason. But yeah. So if you don't have anything else, I think it's until that stuff that I think we're done here.
I think so.